Sorry, I was elected. Welcome everybody to the Housing Element Committee meeting, November 15th. I'll get to my agenda page. All right, here we are. Roll call, Laura.
Jeff Alves.
Here.
Amy Armsby. Here. Sue Crane.
Here.
Sarah Dory.
Here.
Eric Doyle. Bill Kelly.
Here.
Ann Kopsell.
Here.
Andrew Pierce will be absent this afternoon. In his place, we have Lucy Neely.
Here.
Nicholas Targ. Bob Turcott.
Here.
Jamie Ward.
Here.
Sarah Warnikoff.
Here.
Helen Walter. Vice Chair Al Sill.
Here.
And Chair Jocelyn Swisher.
Here. Thank you. Okay. With oral communications, and then we've got a lot of people, 26 people from the, I guess that's including us, huh? Where is how do you get to the public? Oh, attendees, 9 from the public. Fantastic. All right. So for oral communications, persons wishing to address the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee on any subject not on the agenda may do so now. Please note, however, that the Ad Hoc Housing Element Committee is not able to undertake extended discussion or action tonight on items not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. So is there anybody here attending from outside of the committee that wants to address us now? I see a hand with Caroline. Sorry about your last name, Vertonghen. Caroline, go ahead.
Thank you for the committee to listen to my comment. I hope that we can resolve any confusion and any misunderstandings. And so I think it would be very helpful for everybody in town and for your committee, if you really want to come to resolutions, is to use demographic data that is updated. As I had mentioned to Ms. Smith, I mean, she had a wonderful presentation, but you cannot use census data from 2010. A lot has changed. I have been attending, I'm sorry, perhaps a little background. We have been here since 94, and we have been very much involved in the community, a variety of volunteerism and other activities. But I think it's very important that your committee members have all the true facts. And unfortunately, we don't see that right now. There's a lot of young staff, new staff that doesn't know the background. And many of your committee members are also have only been here for 10 or 12 years. And we've been here much longer. So this is not the first time we have tried to come to a resolution to build affordable housing. But I would encourage you to use the facts. So thank you very much.
I think you're muted, Jocelyn.
All right, I was trying to keep my cat from interrupting the comments. Sorry about that. Are we doing the timer this evening? Is that, I see Dylan is on.
We do have it ready. We just didn't quite have it ready in time for that comment, but we will for the rest.
All right. Hi, Dylan. Welcome.
Hi, and just through the chair, I am keeping track of the meeting attendees. So if you look at the timer, the name of it shows the number. So I'm trying to keep it as accurate as possible, but there may be a slight delay.
Okay. Oh, super. And then Dylan, are you going to be calling on attendees?
I can if you wish.
We can. All right. We'll work it out. All right. So let's keep moving along. Anybody else from the public want to talk? I don't see any hands right now. Okay. So why don't we move into the meat of our meeting, which is going to be about accessory dwelling units. And we're going to turn it over to our amazing.
A hand just went up, FYI.
Okay. 851-787. Can you identify yourself, please?
Maida Jones.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I understand I was a few minutes late, I'm sorry to say. I understand this is the open forum part of the meeting, is that correct?
It is, and you have 2 minutes to address the committee.
Yes. I've lived here for 22 years and I'm very passionate about Portola Valley and all that we stand for as a community that is respectful of nature, of the environment, and of each other. And I'm here to ask you to be sure to take into account the fact that we live in a high fire risk area. I've been on the fire risk committee here at the ranch over the years, and I feel like I'm well informed. I follow the news on these topics. And the most flammable item in our environment is houses. And therefore, I feel strongly that we need to, as a community, request of these new housing rules that they allow a minimum of 20 to 30 feet between structures. 30 feet would be preferable. I think that's what the National Committee on Fire Safety has recommended. So that's what I'm asking, is that you include that in the specs for the housing plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right, now we're going to jump into the heart of our discussion about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and we're going to turn it over to our fantastic team from the town.
Thank you very much, Chair Swisher. So I'm going to get into our big ADU discussion for this evening. Hopefully committee members are going to appreciate it's a lot of information. So hopefully it helps us make our decisions moving forward. Let me actually I was just off to the races here and I don't even have my presentation open. I apologize. Give me one quick sec and I'll share my screen. Yay.
Adrian, did you share the presentation right before the meeting? I haven't had a chance to check.
Yes, I actually sent an email out to committee members. It's a box link. And so I've dropped our 2 presentations for this evening into that link. So you're welcome to take a look at that if you want to try and follow along, if you're able to set it up on your screen, or use it as a reference after our discussion as well.
Awesome. Thanks for doing that.
Sure. Okay, here we go. Does everybody see presentation mode? Does that look okay? Great.
Yes.
All right, so the key topics we're going to look at for this particular presentation, we're going to start with background and legislative history. And then actually Laura is going to cover recent changes made to the town's ADU ordinance. We're also going to talk about reporting and income categories, reporting in general that we do to the Hcd on an annual basis. And then we'll take a look at the income categories associated with ADUs. Then finally, we'll take a look at income categories for our upcoming cycle. So we'll look at this current cycle, what we've been doing, and then we'll take a look at some income categories that we could consider. There's actually 2 for this upcoming cycle. So firstly, a little bit of background. Most of you are pretty well versed in ADUs, but just in case, we'll just start at the beginning. So an ADU is a complete independent living facility for 1 or more people. Before the state kind of jumped in and made the language official that the correct terminology is ADU, there's a lot of different terminology floating around, such as second units, in-law units, casitas, granny flats, backyard cottages. There's really a million different terms for ADUs. Important to know is that there's several different variations. There's detached, which of course is separate from the primary dwelling unit. Attached, self-explanatory, also attached to the main dwelling unit. There's also converted existing space. So for example, a master bedroom or an attached garage, and that's on the same lot as the main residence, and it's been converted into an ADU. Similar but different is a junior accessory dwelling unit. So that's conversion of existing space that is contained entirely within the single family residence. So for example, if you converted an existing living room or an existing bedroom, it has to be space that is within the main dwelling. So there's a lot of ADU benefits to keep in mind. It can give residents access to job-rich areas and high opportunity areas. It can provide affordable housing for family and friends, students, the elderly, in-home healthcare providers that are taking care of aging residents, and it can provide housing opportunities for people with disabilities as well. And overall, it's just a really effective way to maximize and integrate housing into existing established neighborhoods. So there's legislative history behind ADUs. The state has very clearly identified that ADUs are a key tool to address housing needs. And this really started in around 2016 when the state started passing a series of increasingly permissive laws meant to simplify the ADU process at the local level. So there was another series of ADU laws effective as of January 2020 as well. And Laura's going to get into a little bit of how the town reacted to that and incorporated those changes into our ordinance. But generally speaking, the legislative changes have increased ADU development across many California communities. So I will hand it to Laura for the next few slides, and then I'll jump back in.
So we'd like to talk a little bit about the town's approach to ADUs in recent years. There was a series of community meetings, and at those meetings, there was discussion about ADUs, and there was a real interest in pursuing ADUs as a housing strategy. So the town council provided some initial direction, and this is kind of in the 2017-2018 timeframe. And then the Planning Commission held a series of meetings that started in the fall of 2018, with code amendments going into effect in 2019. So the idea of those code amendments was to find ways to increase ADU production and also to consider more options for ADUs, more housing types, different sizes, different arrangements that might meet a wider variety of people. So what happened is the Planning Commission was thinking, if we're going to have more ADUs, then we really have to think about fire safety. So that's a very important part of increasing ADU production. So what the Planning Commission did in 2018 is to think about what would be appropriate ways to regulate ADUs that had higher fire safety issues and how we were to define that. So staff did a series of coordination meetings with the fire marshal. It was the previous fire marshal at the time, Denise Ania, before Don Bullard became the fire marshal. And we talked about fire safety restriction based on her feedback. And what we landed on through the Planning Commission discussion was if there's only one way in or out of a location, and that road was less than 15 feet wide, and the property was less than 1 acre, then ADUs should not be allowed at that location. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what this means. This is a blow up of the zoning map, and this is the Highland area. And so the red squiggly line is Santa Maria going up into the neighborhood. So if we apply this concept here, there's only one way in and out of this neighborhood. The street is 17 feet wide, so less than 18 feet. So all streets that are accessed from Santa Maria, that whole neighborhood up above on the hill, is subject to the ADU restriction. So if you're less than 1 acre, you are not allowed to have an ADU at these locations. Next slide. And then 2 more examples in the Corte Madera neighborhood to illustrate how this works. Campo is a small road that you're probably familiar with. There's only one way in and out to those few parcels that are accessed from Campo. It's only about 12 feet, 6 inches wide. And so ADUs are not allowed at that location accessed from Campo on properties less than 1 acre, which those are. Another example is Prado Court, which is that next street over, which is highlighted in green. It's only one way in and out, but it's about 21 feet, 10 inches wide, greater than 18 feet. So ADUs are allowed at that location. So we wanted to give you those examples so you can start to see how this plays out because it's become an important part of the conversation. So next slide. So we mentioned that there was another set of laws that went into effect in 2020. And the caveat we've been giving is that there was a couple laws that work together. They're very complicated, unfortunately, internally inconsistent. There's gaps in that legislation. But at the same time, if we did not adopt an ordinance, then the state law would control, and we wouldn't have the ability to modify it for our own needs and try to exercise the local discretion that we're able to. And it included a number of provisions that are pretty important. This is not the complete list, but this is the list that I thought would be relevant for this group's discussion. It says that the number of ADUs, that batch of says the number of ADUs, generally speaking, is 1 ADU and 1 junior ADU allowed per single family lot. It created multifamily ADUs, and it expressly said that junior ADUs should be permitted when in the past that was an optional thing that cities and towns could include. Next slide. And then very importantly, for Portola Valley, it created a setback of 4 feet to the side and to the rear, which is significantly less than our typical setbacks. In our larger zoning districts, for example, setbacks are 20 feet and can be 10 in some cases, but 4 is a very small setback for the community. It also created state mandated ADUs in several categories. One of the big ones was it allows new construction of an ADU that's up to 800 square feet, 16 feet in height, and with 4-foot side and rear setbacks. And if it meets that particular criteria, then those ADUs can exceed the town's development standards. So we have what we call AMFA, which is adjusted maximum floor area, that regulates the amount of square footage that you can build on any individual lot. This state law trumps our local AMFA and allows people to have that 800 square foot ADU if it meets all of those requirements. It also laid out different requirements for conversions of existing space within single family homes and accessory structures. And also, as I mentioned, created multifamily ADUs, saying that 2 detached ADUs would be permitted at multifamily properties. Next slide. So there was a lot of discussion in this most recent ADU update amongst the Planning Commission with a lot of public testimony around the fire safety aspects of this and how to best mitigate those reduced setbacks. And so the Planning Commission discussed it in length and developed a multi-part approach to address this. So first, number 1 on this slide here, all ADUs must comply with local parcel setbacks relating to health and safety. So this would be things like seismic setbacks would be a good example here. And then we have the restricted area for fire safety. So that's the area I was talking about earlier with the 18-foot wide roads. So that has come to be known as the restricted area for ADUs. So if in the restricted area, ADUs are prohibited on parcels less than 1 acre, as I mentioned. And then also in those same areas, if the parcel is greater than 1 acre, then the ADU must comply with the local setback requirements. It cannot use the state setback requirement. So this was the Planning Commission's attempt to mitigate issues that were coming up from the state law and apply the provisions in the state law that allow us to create some health and safety regulations to protect public safety from that potential fire danger. And then also there's an approach to kind of, we're calling it a carrot and stick. So the Planning Commission created incentives for those projects that comply with the town setbacks. And if you don't comply with the town setbacks, then you get only the basic requirements that are required under the law. So the example would be if you comply with the setbacks, you get larger units, more and more amenities that are associated with those ADU units. Next. The Planning Commission also wanted units that don't comply with the setbacks to have an additional level of scrutiny and attention to fire safety. And so through that discussion, it was decided that a fire safety checklist would be developed. And it was developed and was approved by the town council and went into effect with the ADU ordinance. And the idea is that any ADU that doesn't comply with the local setbacks has to comply with the special fire safety checklist. It was developed by the fire marshal and myself, trying to take the best practices that had come from the fire marshal's experience, the wildfire preparedness committee, and other best practices that we drew from, including CPAW, which is an organization nationwide that's working on these issues. We presented that to the town council and it was adopted by resolution. So it's best practices, particularly in the area of construction materials and defensible space and vegetation management to try to mitigate that fire risk associated with those ADUs. And this applies town-wide, not only in the ADU restriction area. Next slide. So our current ADU ordinance is quite complex because we were trying to apply all of these different factors for fire safety to encourage people to comply with the setbacks and to build in those carrots and sticks as we've been referring to them. But these are some very high level highlights of the current ADU ordinance for those that are not familiar with it. ADUs are allowed in all zoning districts. In the commercial zoning districts, they require review by the ASCC, but this is fairly unusual for us to allow ADUs in all zoning districts before the state law came along and said we had to do it in multifamily, but we have it for commercial as well. We haven't had any people who have taken us up on that, but it is an option in our zoning ordinance. Of course, the fire safety exception applies. And we also codified our geologic safety policies in this most recent ADU ordinance update as well, to make it very clear to people that our geologic safety rules apply in these cases. As I mentioned, in terms of the number that's allowed, now the state law says 1 ADU and 1 JADU allowed on almost all properties that are less than 3.5 acres. And then 2 ADUs are allowed on properties that are 3.5 acres or more. There are some restrictions on that, but that's been in our code for a couple of years now. In terms of the maximum size of ADUs, it depends on whether the ADU meets the town setbacks or whether it's using the state setback of 4 feet. If the project complies with our local setbacks, then the size limit is 1,200 square feet if the property is less than 3.5 acres, and 1,500 square feet if the property is 3.5 acres or more. And there was a lot of discussion amongst the planning commissioners about the size of these units when we went through that update in 2018 and going into 2019. And then, as I mentioned, the fire safety checklist applies if the ADU does not meet the town setback. Next slide, please. So we've gotten a lot of questions about how we count the ADUs, how they apply, and how we report those ADUs into HCD, Housing and Community Development at the state level. So we wanted to give you some additional information on that for your kind of to provide context and to answer some of the questions that have been coming up. So this is our current cycle 5 category assignments that are within our adopted housing element. So our current housing element. So very low and extremely low income units get reported together, and that's assumed to be 50% of the ADUs that we produce fall into that category. And then this is a little funny with the rounding, you know how it can be. The next two are 19% and 21% for the low income and the moderate income category. And then above moderate income is assumed to be 10% of the units. So this is the number of ADUs that were projected by our current housing element in the different categories. So they assume that there would be 52 units that would fall across those categories. So the method for assigning these units has been an important question. So what happened during this housing element cycle, and a version of it is happening again now, for the cycle 6 is 21 Elements, who is the countywide consultant that we've been talking about that helps all the cities and towns in the county, did a study in 2013, and it's considered like a safe harbor study. So they looked at different rents, they looked at some surveys that were done by the town of Hillsborough, and at that time, there was not a tremendous amount of scrutiny on ADU affordability assignments. It was really kind of a different time in terms of how people were looking at affordability and ADUs. But it was considered the best practice, and it created kind of a pre-approval by HCD so that cities and towns would know how to project their ADUs into the future, and then how to start assigning them as ADUs were getting built. So what the town did was took these numbers that came from the 21 Element study and put it into our housing element as our adopted policy, and the housing element was certified by HCD. So these became the numbers by which ADUs were getting assigned. And so what happens is each year there's a certain number of ADUs that we have building permits that are issued for. And so what staff does is to look at those numbers, and our numbers are very small, right? So it's kind of a strange exercise to do with a very small number of units. But we look at those numbers and we assign them into these categories because they have to go somewhere. So we're required to track those units through a long process from when they're first being planned until the building permits are issued, and then when they're done with completion. So we have to keep track of them somehow. So the practice that the town has been using and other communities use as well is to assign them into an income category. And so they're just stay within that category throughout the process. And then we're not mixing and matching the different units. So we're accounting for them the same all the way through. The system that was set up by 21 Elements and the HCD reporting form, which I'll talk about in just a moment, really does make more sense for a much higher volume of units, of ADU units, and of affordable units in general. And so when we're looking at the very small numbers, you can imagine if we're signing 20% of a low number, you might not have any units that fall into that category due to rounding, or you may have a percentage of a unit that falls into that category. So that method that we've been using is an accepted method and considered a best practice, but it probably does not hold up to the scrutiny of more recent years, and certainly not going forward in terms of the level of detail that people are looking for when we're looking at affordable housing production and having these conversations in this context today. So next slide, please. So we didn't give this to you because you can read it. We know you can't read it. We gave this to you just to share, this is what the Hcd form looks like. Every city and town in the state of California fills out the same table. It's designed for much, much larger cities that are going to have many, many, many rows. We're not allowed to change it. We have to use their exact form. And it tracks the different phases that I was talking about. So from across this form, we're tracking initial applications, planning approvals, building permit submittals, certificates of occupancy, and we have to keep track of all of those individual units as they go through that process that might take 3 or even 4 years. So we have to keep track of all those different units. The process that we use to do this is the planning and building staff looks at the permit data and keeps track of all of the net new housing units. And so a lot of those are going to be ADUs that are net new units. And so we keep track of those addresses and APNs, which we're required to report on. And then we fill out the table and we assign them into a category, as I mentioned, and it's just according to the formula. So we don't know for a fact that that particular homeowner is going to rent that unit at any particular affordability level, but they're assigned an affordability level just for record keeping so that we can build those assumptions into the reporting. And then we fill out this form And the town's practice is to take it both to Planning Commission and to the town council. And that happens in the springtime so that we can submit our report to HCD. The town hasn't always been on time in submitting our report. We've been trying very hard to be on time in the most recent years to submit that by April 1st. So if you've seen a discussion at either Planning Commission or Town Council in the last few years on the housing element annual report, this is what we're talking about. And this is where we report the number of units that have had building permits that have been issued. So otherwise, if we didn't do it this way, everything would get stuck. And we've been doing a deep dive into our ADU units and how they've been allocated, check things out, and to check our reporting. And we have identified that early in this cycle of cycle 5, some of our reports that were submitted to HCD weren't completely accurate. They had a slightly different reporting form at the time, and some of our units did not get reflected. And so if you go to the HCD website, you won't see the same number of units that we have in the town records. So we're going to be revisiting all of those old reports and confirming all of the income categories, make sure everything was assigned properly according to our housing element and those best practices. And we're going to have to submit to HCD forms to correct those reports from those past mistakes. So we're happy to have identified it, and we'll be able to get that corrected so that everybody will have the same information. So that's some information about how we do the annual report. And when we're done, I'm sure that there's going to be questions, and I'll be happy to try to answer questions when we get to that point. And then I think, next slide.
It's me.
Oh yeah, next slide is Adrian, so back to you.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Laura. All right, so we were just talking about how, there's been some changes in this current cycle 5. There was a difference in reporting structure. HCD changed their paperwork to a little bit more of a complex situation in terms of what they're requesting from towns and cities. So, our earlier years, we're gonna work on correcting those numbers and making sure we have all the accurate information. But what we do know is that 2018 through to year to date in 2021, we have accurate numbers there. And so we did want to provide just a quick look at how we're trending from 2018 through 2021. The other important thing to point out as well is that HCD has recommended that when you're projecting your ADUs for this upcoming cycle 6, it's good to draw from data of your past 3 or so years. The average number of your past 3 or so years is a good indicator of what you should be thinking about moving forward into your next cycle.
Thank you.
Obviously, what's a little bit funny about the data here is that 2020 was a funny year. You see a big drop off. Obviously, COVID disrupted a lot of things, including the town's ADU production. So we do see that 2020 is perhaps not the most accurate year to take as an average. So that's something we're going to have to look at as a committee when we're working through this information. So for example, if we wanted to tell the HCD, listen, our data from 2020 isn't particularly reliable, this is why, and we want to discount that somewhat and place less emphasis on it, we would have to make that case to them, and we can do that. So that's something we'll talk about. You also see an interesting jump from 2018 to 2019, and we're attributing that to the town's ordinance updates as well. So a lot of applicants held tight, waited for the new ordinance to be adopted by the town, and then they came in with their application. So that's why you see a pretty healthy jump from 2018 of 4 units up to 2019, 10 units. So I was talking about before that we're looking at some new income category splits for ADUs. Laura went over the income split that we're dealing with for cycle 5. I'm just going to pull that slide up really quick, which is a split of 50% extremely low, very low, 19 for low, 21 for moderate, and 10 for above moderate. So what we're looking at now is a standard, so I'll start on the left-hand side of this chart with the standard split. So this is the split that's recommended as a baseline by 21 Elements to all San Mateo County jurisdictions. And it's based firstly on a comprehensive study that was done by the Center of Community Innovation at the University of California at Berkeley in 2020. And their research resulted in a document that was released this past April. So 21 Elements has used that study as a foundation to consider ADU affordability levels while developing housing element site analysis, housing element sites inventory analyses. So the standard affordability split is informing, and all informing research has been vetted by the Hcd. So they've had a look at this information and they've more or less, blessed it or indicated that they don't find the split problematic, that it could work for most jurisdictions. So again, this is sort of the standard split that 21 Elements is recommending as a floor. So this would be our sort of foundation. But if, for example, market conditions in a particular jurisdiction warrant higher assumptions, that argument can be made. But again, you would have to have the backup and to be able to make that case for Hcd consideration. So next we move over to this other column to the right, the AFFH split. And what this is that jurisdictions need to be considering ADU affordability classifications in concert with affirmatively furthering fair housing. So this is something we've talked about in some of our past meetings. And AFFH is a required component of the housing element. So many ADUs are affordable to lower and moderate income households because they are rented to family and friends of the homeowners. However, if minorities are underrepresented among homeowners, the families and potentially the friends of the homeowners will be primarily white. So therefore, relying too heavily on ADUs to achieve the low-income units required by RHNA could inadvertently exacerbate patterns of segregation and inclusion. So jurisdictions with fair housing concerns may want to look at this more conservative split, where assumptions are based on open market rentals, excluding units made available to family and friends. So this is something that the committee is going to need to sort of take in and consider. No decision needs to be made immediately at this point, but it's something we need to figure out and decide upon as we move forward in our update process for our ADU income classifications. So here it is actually playing out. You can see the splits with the actual number of units. So we're assuming an estimated unit production in this upcoming cycle of ADUs of 80. And that's based on past data, primarily based upon our past 3 years of ADU production. I was talking about that a little bit earlier, where we're getting this number from. So that's our baseline number, 80 units. Okay, and so then we actually take it and apply it to our splits, the standard split or the AFFH split. So you can tell it's a pretty dramatic difference. So if we go with our standard split, we're assuming that 24 of our units are going to be very low income. But if we look over at our AFFH split, okay, well, probably realistically, perhaps we're looking at more like 4 very low income units. So this is how it looks. This is a snapshot of what we would be considering. So something for committee members to absorb and think through. I do also just want to quickly acknowledge an error in the staff report for the ADU discussion item. So thank you to member Sill, who pointed that out to me. In the second table, the numbers were wrong, cycle 6 proposed units for the AFFH split. So I apologize for that error in the staff memo, but it's been corrected here in the presentation. So we wanted to bring this particular spreadsheet to the committee to sort of get a sort of 1,000-foot view of everything that we've been talking about up until now. So what this is a draft RHNA projection. It takes into account all the different types of units we've been considering up until now. Again, this is very draft. So let's start at the top row here, and we can kind of go down. So firstly, we have our RHNA. We know our baseline RHNA is 253 units. Last meeting, we talked about the RHNA zoning target, which is, the buffer or the contingency, whatever you'd like to consider it as. And 21 Elements, the Hcd recommends as a baseline 20%. So Again, the committee hasn't come to any kind of decision on that, what our zoning target should be, but for the purpose of this exercise, we've built in a 20% zoning target. So you see that our baseline RENA number of 253 is showing as 304. So that's where we're sitting there. As we move down to the preceding rows here, we see pipeline projects. So pipeline projects, those are projects that either, I don't want to say a sure thing, but a project that is going to be reliably is going to make its way through the planning entitlement process. So we do have a couple pipeline projects that we feel are pretty reliable to consider in our overall count. One is the Stanford project that everybody knows about. And the other is the supportive housing project Willow Commons. So just to note it again, this is a draft projection, including the unit categorization. So for pipeline projects, we're showing, for example, 19 low-income units. That's not a sure thing. Again, these projects need to make their way through the planning process, but it's a decent estimate for now to sort of see where we're sitting. And then the next row is our ADUs, and this is assuming the standard split, the 30-30-30-10 split. So you can see those units are laid out there. Affiliated housing sites. Again, we're not entirely sure what these units look like. We do know probably a fairly sure, I don't want to say a sure thing, but something to rely upon is 6 units on town-owned land, particularly near town center, the substation site is what we've been calling it. So as just to sort of, put something into this category, we think we can rely upon 6 units. Key housing sites, that we don't have anything inputted for yet, because that's going to be based upon our housing sites inventory, which is what we talked about last meeting. So we took a look at a number of housing site scenarios. We looked at possible unit yield there. Again, we have to make a decision on which of those sites to move forward on, because they do require further feasibility analysis so that we can be sure that the unit yield we've been estimating is reliable. So again, we will have numbers to put into that row to populate key housing sites. So then we have our total unit number there that we're estimating. I should say key housing sites will be a large number, so I don't want viewers to be nervous about this number, because that is a big piece of the puzzle that we will have filled in soon enough. But again, this is a really good snapshot of sort of all the different pieces coming together, where all of our projects are coming from, what the numbers look like. So something to sort of keep in mind and think about. Again, going back to the ADU income classification, we've used the standard split here. So if we want to talk about using the AFFH split, that's going to change up. The baseline unit number we're going to stick with, I think, for now is around 80 units, but it will change up the affordability levels if we decide to go with the AFFH split. So what we'd like the committee to sort of think about is how we want to approach ADUs. How important do we feel that ADUs are to the town's RENA, to achieving the town's RENA? We know now, based on a lot of information coming to us from our consultant, a lot of the data that we've reviewed as a committee, that ADUs are unlikely to be a major source of low-income units. But if we're believing in the power of ADUs to satisfy the moderate and above moderate income levels, how strongly do we feel about that? How much do we want to focus on ADU production for the town? And do we need to streamline the process further? Laura talked at length about what our ADU ordinance looks like. It's a complicated ordinance for very good reason. We have heard feedback. Some of you might have heard it at the the community-wide meeting, that the ADU application and construction process is too difficult. It's too arduous. So that's something to talk about as well. And how we could facilitate that is building it into the housing element programs. So we could look at a potential ADU program if that's something we want to pursue. So that's it for this presentation. Of course, definitely staff here to answer some questions to start, and we can go from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Adrian, for some informative presentation. Okay, so this is area for committee discussion, and I just want to encourage people to jump in, ask questions, share your thoughts.
I'm sorry, through the
This is,
chair. Our
Yeah.
recommendation would be to take questions from the committee at this time, and then hold more of the robust discussion until after public comments.
Sounds great. So starting,
this is Bill Kelly. The question I had is, I don't quite understand what the practical implication is of the allocation to the different categories. If I'm going to build an ADU on my house and it gets assigned somehow a low income category, does that have any implication on what I do with the property? Do I have any choice about that? Or is this just, we're setting a target and this is the way we hit the target?
We are, to use your words, we are setting a target, and this is the way we keep track of them and apply the assumptions. So there are no, we don't have a method where we directly communicate with the homeowners on how they intend to use the unit, and it doesn't result in any restrictions onto your property.
And so from the town's perspective, what's the implication if, having said we're going to do 50% low income units, it turns out after 5 years we've only done 10%? Is that what's the teeth associated with enforcing something in that situation?
The way that the laws and things have been implemented in recent years, there hasn't been teeth on that particular issue. I think there certainly is a chance that that could change in the future, because people have been assigning these ADUs based on these assumptions. And so the buildings are getting built, but we don't know for sure if people are living in those buildings and whether they're used for affordable housing. One thing that I do think is important to note is, the buildings have a certain life, which is, could be quite long. It's 30 years or 50 years or more. And so we want to think about the life of those buildings, not just this particular owner and how that owner is using it right now. And so that's another thing to think about when we're discussing ADUs.
So I can't tell from this whether this is something that's important or not. Is it something worth agonizing how we allocate this, or is it all sort of hypothetical stuff anyway, so it doesn't matter?
I think it is important. The towns has primarily achieved its RHNA through ADUs, and we know that ADUs have been assigned based on these assumptions. So there is an important policy or kind of philosophical question for this committee to consider about whether we want to put in place, for example, programs in our next housing element so that we actually monitor some of these ADUs or survey them so that we can see how they're going, and then really try to produce the affordable units.
Okay, thank you.
So when I think about this and ADUs, it seems like it's a big puzzle, and we have to get the numbers poked into the right place. And so, in other words, one has property and they want to build something for their mother. Okay. Now, we don't know what category the mother is going to be in, and especially if the mother is going to eventually change places with one of the children. So we don't know what category we're filling in that ADU. Is that correct? Is that the way we're looking at this, that we build it, but we're not sure what category it's in? And as a matter of fact, it could change.
Yes, it certainly could change depending on how that household is using it over time. Perhaps you have an adult child with disabilities, or you have a college-age person that's living in that unit. And then a few years later, maybe the grandmother moves into that unit. And those people may or may not be low-income people as we're defining it, right, for affordable housing. So it's the assumptions and the studies that they're trying to do, are trying to build some of that in to know that ADUs might get used differently over the years. And some people who live in them might live in them for free or very reduced rent, and they would otherwise be in the housing market paying a market rate rent and not being able to afford it.
So it's difficult to define the ADU, and it's also difficult to acknowledge whether it is going to define into into equity, into all white, a white residents as you count it. But the basic problem now is we don't even know, we have not in the past been able to count it. We don't count it. We don't have that list that tells us exactly at present who those ADU people are. We don't have a good count of that, do we, Laura?
We have a good count of the ADUs in town and where they're located. We do not have any count of how those ADUs are being used, if they're being rented, and at what levels.
And that's the most important part for us. That's the most important thing that we need to go forth, is to see what we have. Is that not?
Yeah,
is that so?
It could be, yes, it could be important, right? But there's also there's some philosophical questions involved too, in that, you know, the town has been complying with the best practice and making those assignments and kind of meeting the rules. And so now we're going forward in a different time and with more scrutiny and with perhaps a change in what the community is looking for. So these are the questions I think to be asking. The questions you're asking are the exact right ones.
We very well might be ahead of the game. We might have more than we know in certain categories.
So what do you mean by that, Sue? Can you clarify, please?
Yes, that they are unreported. So someone builds an ADU, they have not responded to the town that they have one, or that they're renting just across the board at a high cost. And so that it's not included as an ADU, they're just renting to Stanford students. So that cannot be counted as an ADU.
Laura, do you want to comment?
Well, we are, when ADUs, when net new ADUs, building permits are issued, we do count them. So we are counting them towards our current Cycle 5 RENA and reporting them to Hcd according to the method that I talked about. What we don't know is how they're being used in real life.
And this is something that we can kind of continue to talk about as a committee, I guess is what you're suggesting. Philosophically, what do we want to be doing as a town? And then do we want to modify the approach that we're taking to achieve that? Yeah.
It seems necessary to me.
Okay. Thanks, Sue. You've asked some really great probing questions. I appreciate it. I just want to remind people to use our handy little raise your hand.
Oh, yes, yes.
Some of you're doing going forward. Amy, your hand has been up for a while. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate the questions and just the overview of what the presentation by Adrian and Laura. I have a couple questions about the safe harbor that was referenced. The idea being there is this construct, as I understand it, and if I'm not accurately representing this, please let me know, because I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
there's a Berkeley study that's done. 21 Elements comes up with this construct where they create a formula, essentially, right? That gets applied to the total number of ADUs. It's not based on what those ADUs are actually being used for. It's based on a study that presumably looked at what ADUs are actually used for in, I guess, in some other setting that is considered. I really don't know what the assumptions were for the study, but just as I heard what Laura and Adrian were talking about, the idea is that HCD has approved this formula as a safe harbor, and I'm curious in what context. I mean, did they codify that? What's our assurance that that is an acceptable formula with which to comply with the current legal requirements?
Okay, very good question. And so in the last housing element cycle, I'm sorry, can I back up? Your description, I think is very accurate in terms of how it's constructed, right? And that it's a formula applied to the total based on a study. Okay. I think your description is very good. Okay. And then in terms of what assurances do we have? In the past housing element cycle, cycle 5, HCD gave strong assurance to 21 Elements, and it panned out. So when everyone turned in their draft housing elements, that ratio was approved by HCD. This time around, we think it's a little bit more complicated, and we think we're going to have to talk to HCD about it, because there is a big difference, as we showed, between the ratio between those standard numbers that are based on that really big study, and then what some people are recommending with the fair housing component that's built in. So we think, given the situation of the town, that we don't fall very clearly into either of those buckets. And so we think we need to have a conversation with HCD and try to get some assurance and feedback and direction from them about where they think communities like Portola Valley should be and what assumptions would be appropriate. So we wanted to present both of those things so that you can start to understand these issues, because we're going to have to follow up on them and start to kind of plan for this. But we're going to try to reach out to HCD and get assurance that we can count on, so that we can make all the projections work.
Right, and just quick follow-up. So there really are two issues here that we're talking about, and I think they've been identified in Stu's questions and in, I think, to some extent in my questions. There's the issue of what is necessary to ensure our legal compliance, and then there's a question that is sort of layered on top of that: how much, perhaps how much more do we want to do or require or inquire to know what the practical impact of this additional housing is? That's what I hear. I mean, I hear that there are conversations that are touching on, okay, there's legal compliance, but then are we really increasing our affordable housing stock when we apply this formula? And the answer to that is we don't really know under the current situation. We don't have enough information, right, to know whether this formula we've applied that puts the units into various buckets actually reflects reality.
I think that's a very good summary, and I think that's accurate. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amy. Those are really helpful questions. Okay, next up is Helen Wolter. You've had your hand up. Go ahead, Helen.
Hi. I appreciated Amy's comments because I am concerned about so I'm kind of echoing what she said a little bit. But I also would just say, like, I've been looking for rentals. There's been 1 to 2 rentals under $5,000 a month, which is not low or moderate or even extreme low for the past 6 months. And that's just one data. I've been looking to see what we've got. And we just don't have rentals available unless you know someone, is my sense, right? So I would definitely, the methodology for deciding what what is going to be counted as low and extremely low and moderate needs to be carefully thought out. Also, I'm just curious, has anyone else been trying to build an ADU? Raise your hand if you've been trying to build an ADU in town. Curious if I'm the only one on this committee who's been trying to do that. So 2 of us.
Mine's done, but yes.
Okay, so I've been working on mine for 6 years. I've dealt with 13 architects. I've dealt with, God, I don't know how many prefabs I've interviewed and looked at. And I've spent $50,000 on architects at this point. I got my first bids and they're over $1 million, both of them, for 2 bids. And that's, at $950 a square foot, approximately. So, I think trying to create low and, moderate and low income, and this is more of a comment, sorry, I kind of veered off. But I think it's really important to think about this because I think we, to meet that criteria, there is state money. I know Bob Turcott and I discussed this a little bit. There will be some state money if you deed restrict it, but it's $25,000 to help pay for permitting and state funding, or state permitting and architect fees. And then they're helping people with $200,000 up to $200,000 if you deed restrict for a construction loan, but it's got strings. So thanks. Sorry, I veered off.
Okay.
But those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to focus right now on questions, and then we're going to open it up to more of a discussion. Okay, just as a reminder. Okay, Janie, go ahead. Your hand's up.
I was just curious, as part of the permitting process, do we, with respect to private property rights, do we inquire like what this will be used for? Do we have kind of a voluntary, piece of that process where we ask who's going to be living in it and what rent they plan to charge at that time? I mean, is that some way we could collect data? I mean, it'd be voluntary, obviously, but as part of the permitting process, we at least ask for information.
It's definitely possible. It's not something the town has done in the past.
Yeah.
Anything else, Janie?
Well, I just think listening to, the type of investment this requires and, the return on your investment doesn't make sense that people will want to rent it to below market rate. If, what Helen was speaking to, it's a significant investment. So I think the numbers are a little skewed if we're looking at that study in terms of where realistically people are going to rent.
Okay. So let's get into that. I want you to pick that thread up in a few minutes when we get to the discussion, okay? Because that's important. Don't lose that. Bob, you had sent in some great questions on the ADUs, and I don't know, your hand is up. I want to make sure your questions are asked.
Oh, thank you. Those might fit well in the discussion part, because those are really questions I had for the other committee members. But question for the staff I have now. It's still unclear to me how you assign a particular permit to a particular income category. Is that, do you just sort of look at the size relative to recent applications, or like how do you determine the actual income category for a particular permit?
We just assign them. There's not criteria.
So randomly, do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
You just sort of take turns? Okay, got it. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I need a quick reminder on key housing sites, that row of the table. I was drawing a blank. Can you give me like a 2-sentence refresher on what the key housing sites refers to?
That's our housing inventory that we started to talk about at the last meeting, where we're going to identify potential locations for maybe a change in zoning or more intensity of use.
Got it. I didn't see the effect of SB 9 in that table. Are you anticipating that getting incorporated in the projections, and when would that happen?
Yes, the form that will take is not known yet. So we're working on that. We're trying to find out if we can get some additional data on SB9. Cara is going to talk a little bit about SB9 at the end of this meeting today, but we definitely will. It's an evolving area of how we might be able to quantify a number of SB9 units that might be anticipated and then try to fit them into the housing element projections.
Okay. And then in terms of the emergency vehicle access restrictions for ADUs, that of course makes perfect sense to have that. For people that spend a lot of time looking at the town maps and reading about fire science, there's a feeling that that doesn't go nearly far enough. Housing density and building separation matter a lot. Recent data suggests it matters more than defensible space and home construction techniques. So the caller earlier was absolutely right. Building separation matters. I tried to correlate the areas that have the emergency vehicle access restrictions with the Moritz map that the study that the town commissioned when it decided not to adopt the CAL FIRE map. And I couldn't find it anywhere on the website. Is it publicly available?
You know, I'm sorry, Bob, we'll have to check. If it's not, we'll make sure that it is.
Okay, it'd be nice to have access to that.
Through the chair, the Moritz map is a really, really large file. We can share it with you directly. We might have to FTP or something, but it's not on the website because it's actually so detailed and large that it's really hard to get onto a website. That was what I've been told in the past.
Maybe we can have the GIS folks reduce it and see if we can get it on now. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And then finally, not really a question, but just following up on the previous comments. I learned recently that a town can require any development under SB9 to be deed restricted for affordable housing. So every unit that's produced under SB9 could be deed restricted if the town chose to do that. I wasn't aware of that. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, on to Sarah Wernickoff.
I had a couple questions about the same slide that Bob was asking about on the cyclist with the draft projections.
You want us to bring it back up? Would that help?
Sure, I could just ask the questions. On pipeline projects, I guess my math is different. I'm wondering, my understanding is Stanford would be 49 and Willow Commons would be 12 or 13. Is that right? Because I see a total there of 52.
Stanford's 39. 27 faculty and 12 affordable.
Okay, I thought it was 10 more than that. Maybe that's where my math is wrong.
Correct. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura or Adrian. But
yeah, I think it's 27 and then
27
12
and 12.
affordable. And then we put 13 for Willow Commons for now, I think is what we have there.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Laura, do you remind me where Willow Commons is?
Willow Commons is an application that was just recently received. It's for supportive housing. It's on Alpine Road, kind of 2 parcels over from Roberts.
Gotcha.
Right in
Okay.
there.
I hadn't got that name in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, if this is new to anyone, there is a project page on the website. If anyone at home or on the committee is interested in reading that brief description.
Thank you.
And then on the affiliated housing line, does that assume that 6 would be anything from Priory, anything from Sequoias, anything from churches that we know of? Is that comprehensive of all that?
No, we haven't really started to collect that part of the information yet. So this is just a placeholder to say, for example, if the town did a town-owned property as an affiliated housing project.
Okay. So that's really just the town, just the soccer field one.
Yes. So what we'll need to do is get more information from the affiliated housing partners and talk to potential future partners and then start to populate this row.
Okay. And then my last question kind of goes back to all the comments that everybody else was making about the concerns about, market forces will come in for ADUs, and how do you really, prevent, so to speak, ADUs just end up, going for $3,000 to $5,000 a month just because of market forces. So could you share with the committee like some ideas of what options there would be to control, is it deed restriction? Is it rent control? Like, how would we even think about setting low income housing rates in a free market, area? I don't, that's the part that I'm trying to think through.
I think that deed restrictions are possible in some communities. We just heard, but if not confirmed yet, that the city of Saratoga is using deed restrictions successfully. And so we've asked for additional information from them. It feels very challenging to me because it's so expensive to build ADUs here, that a small amount of money, like when deed restriction programs first started, they were waiving permit fees, for example. But no one is going to build an ADU to get a $25,000 worth of permit fees waived and then deed restrict it for any number of years, right? You would have to be wanting to rent it at a lower income anyway. It doesn't make economic sense. So we are very interested to hear that there is a community that with it, significant property values that also has a deed restriction program that may be working. So we're going to get some more information on that and can provide it back. But I'm not familiar with any other locations with high property values that have been successful with deed restriction programs, but we're going to continue to look into it. I'm not an expert on rent control, but it's a very challenging legal landscape. And I don't think that it would be one that we'd be able to take on successfully. But if the committee wanted more information on those kinds of options, we can certainly, continue to ask around and see if other people have more ideas. There's also a lot of movement been recently going on with pre-approved designs for ADUs and more prefabricated ADUs where you could use a design that's already been approved and in some cases already been plan checked, so reviewed by the building department so that it already complies with the code. So some of those things would at least save time in terms of the number of months it would take, and it could save architectural and engineering costs. We have some challenges around that because of our topography. And so it's not just like setting an 800 square foot ADU down on a flat lot, right? Near El Camino in San Carlos or Redwood City, where you just have a flat lot that you could put an ADU down in. So those are some ideas that have come up that we haven't put a lot of focus on so far in the community, but we certainly could look into them more deeply.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Al, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I had a question on the how the categorization on the pipeline projects was done, because my understanding of the Willows project is that 11 of the units were going to rent for $500 a month. And so I expected to see those in very low as opposed to low, because boy, $500 a month has got to be about as low as we're ever going to see in Portola Valley. But is there something that I'm not understanding properly about how that categorization is done?
No, you're understanding it well. It was such an early take of we were just putting them into categories. And in that case, I didn't have any information in front of me about how those units may be rented. So this is just, I was taking a guess in the moment. That's all.
I got it. Okay. Okay. So if it's $500 a month, then it probably would end up in the very low category.
Yeah, then it would be in the very low. And
Great.
like the Stanford units, for example, we know that 6 of them are going to be low income, but we don't know what the other 6 are going to be. So I just randomly assigned them to moderate because it was just a place to put them for now.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks for your question, Al. Anybody else on the committee with questions at this point? Okay, Janie, your hand's up, but I'm assuming you're done. Thanks. Okay, so we're gonna.
Sorry, I didn't know how to remove it.
That's okay. I'm not sure I do either. So.
Oh, here I see. Okay.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to go to the public for questions, right, Laura?
Yep, questions and comments from the,
Comments too?
yep.
Questions and comments.
Yep.
All right. We've got, trying to remember, 851-787. Let's see, was that Myra Jones?
I think that's right. I
Yep,
don't really have
go
my
ahead.
number. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
You
go.
don't have a name on your box, so sorry.
Oh my, well,
All right,
I
go ahead,
actually do
Myra.
have a name. I do have a name. I want to reassure everyone. I have a very basic question. I don't know all the ins and outs, although I hope to attend more of your meetings and learn the details, but I have followed the general law and its development. It's supposed to increase housing, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't see anything here that guarantees that these units, I'm thinking of ADUs right now, will actually be rented. I have heard of at least one plan to build an ADU and then use it as a supplemental room in a private residence for the same family that builds it. To me, my superficial understanding of the law, that doesn't, it contradicts the intent. And I'm wondering what the town plans to do about that kind of a loophole. Hello?
Does somebody want to answer that question from the town?
I would say that that's a really important question for this committee to discuss and for the policymakers to make a decision on.
Okay, thanks, Myra. All right, I see Judy Murphy. Judith Murphy.
Hi, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. One is, I don't have any kind of a comprehensive survey, but of the 4 ADUs I know of that have been built in the last 3 or 4 years, none of them provide additional housing. They're not rented. They're an office, a workout room, and guest rooms. So that's one point. It's not that I think we shouldn't be doing it, but I think it often doesn't accomplish what you think it's accomplishing. I'd be really in favor of finding a way of tracking what happens with ADUs, just because otherwise we really have no meaningful information to move forward with. Number 2 is I don't see how ever at current construction costs, which are probably never going to go down, there could ever be low or perhaps even moderate housing built out here because it's just too bloody expensive. I just recently finished a remodel piece and it cost me more than my house originally did 30 years ago. So it seems like there's a wall there. I have no idea how to get around it. Even if we go to multifamily clusters, et cetera, there's the cost of construction is still going to be huge. And the other thing is we're talking about streamlining process. And I would like to really have people keep in mind that as we streamline process, I worry that we will lose sight of conservation values, that already that's an issue in town, and that with things being ministerially approved, heritage trees are being, the people who ministerially approved aren't in the habit of thinking about heritage trees, et cetera, scenic vistas, et cetera. And I'd hate to have attention to those things get lost as we move into streamlining process. Thank you very much.
Okay. That was helpful, Judah. Thank you. Lonnie Austin. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just saw am I unmuted now?
No, yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, this is my first meeting on these topics. So if this isn't relevant to this discussion, we can just sideline it. I'll be back for another meeting. I'm just returning into town after a few years abroad. My biggest concern around all this talk about low-income housing, adding it to the town, I understand there's a requirement from the state, but my biggest concern is infrastructure, crosswalks, schools. Where are low-income people going to shop? Are they going to shop at Roberts and buy gas at Ron Ramey's? Like, where's the infrastructure to support these new low-income families. Is this something that the town is planning for? We've had continual discussions with the town about the safety of our children, all the kids coming down from Corte Madera. There's going to be more traffic at the Alpine and Portola Road corners. My understanding is a lot of this low-income housing being proposed is for that corner in the Nathorst corner. And I just would really encourage the town to think very carefully about making sure that not only fire, but also just infrastructure, how we support, if there's 253 new units in Nathorst Triangle, how do we support that traffic? Are you going to allow for all this traffic to cut through our neighborhood streets like Echo and Corte Madera? Are you going to leave the crosswalks the way they are? There were years we didn't even have crossing guards to help our kids cross the street. So this is just something I wanted to raise as an issue in addition to just the larger concern of fire safety, just infrastructure to support just these new people who will be moving into the town. And I just also wanted to echo this idea of the ADUs being so incredibly expensive to build. I can't even imagine how after someone's invested all that money, they're going to be able to rent it to a low income family. We also had a bid and it was on our small property over $500,000 to build.
Right, Lonnie, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask you to wrap up? Your time is out and keep moving.
I also wanted to just on the ADU echo what was talked about with how expensive it is to build one and how someone who builds one probably won't be able to rent it back out if they want to return on their investment at a low income rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to town and thanks for participating. Okay, I don't see any other hands up from the public participants.
We had the phone number, I believe, that was ending in 4610.
Okay. Does that means it's a question with that little symbol there? Okay. Dylan, we can, yep, talking permitted. Okay, somebody's calling in with the 4610 number. Go ahead. Do you have that set up, Dylan?
I do. There they go.
There we go.
Hi, it's Eric Doyle, and I was just trying to figure out how to unmute. My question was answered earlier, so I am okay at this point.
Awesome. Thanks for participating, Eric. Rita Gomez. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I just want to make you aware that I'm very active with a bunch of things, but League of Women Voters, I'm part of League of Women Voters of South San Mateo County, and North Central San Mateo County will be putting on a seminar tomorrow, and I'll probably put it on the Portola Valley Forum so that people can register if they're interested. And the forum is going to be about housing, SB 9 and SB 10. League of Women Voters has done a lot around the world, but mostly in the US about focusing on the issues that and really researching the issues. And so people that are interested in attending that. But I just wanted to agree with some of the callers before about infrastructure. And I've been in this town. I bought my property in 2009, and so far I have not seen, and not that someone's going to send me a little memo to be privy, but an infrastructure plan for this town. I constantly hear about building, and if you want to tap into the sewer, you need to do this. If you want to do this, then you're going to have to underground it yourself. But I haven't seen an overall plan for this town, but we constantly hear about RENA numbers, what we're going to have to do for this, what we're going to have to do for that. And, as I've said before, we're reacting instead of making our own plan. And I'd really like to see this town that's full of extremely intelligent people, stop the presses and make a plan. And it doesn't make sense for someone to spend $1 million for ADU on their property and be expected to rent it out unless they are, just doing it from the goodness of their heart for $700 a month below market. It won't even cover the taxes for that new part of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Right on time. Look at that. All right, Christy Corley, let's see if you can top that.
Thank you for taking my comment.
Are you calling from Mars, Christy? There's a weird echo thing going on.
Okay, I'm gonna have to
There you
turn
go. I think that sounded better.
Okay. Thank you for taking my, am I
I'm
echoing?
sorry, Christy, if you're on 2 different devices, you need to mute the other one because I see
Gotcha.
you in the audience twice, so mute your other device.
Okay,
That should solve
thank
it.
you. I was driving and then I got home. Thank you. I just want to comment regarding the ADUs that I think it would be really important for this committee to request and add to your ordinance of ADUs that I believe we can ask that neighbors be notified, and I'm suggesting more of a 500 500, what is it, not square feet. We have 300 right now, and
It's a radius.
ADUs do not have to be notified, neighbors do not have to be notified, and I'm asking that with 400 back setbacks and 4-foot side and back setbacks, that this will be extremely important to notify 500 feet away rather than just 300 feet away, or is there no notification at all? Can you clarify on that, Laura? Because I think it would be nice to even have 1,000 feet away, at least for building. So I think our 300 feet is a little bit low. It's something that this committee could really develop in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Okay. I think we've already heard from that one there. Okay. I guess, Anne, did you have a question?
No, I was just putting my hand up for when we get to the comments or discussion.
Great. Yeah.
Want to be first.
Yeah. So I think we're sort of at the 6 o'clock mark, which was when we designated to end this discussion or part of the agenda. But I think the committee discussion is going to be really important on this. I'm really curious to hear from all of you about your concerns, ideas around ADUs and kind of what you've learned about with all these different questions. Okay, so let's start with Anne.
Hey, you all know I'm on the Planning Commission, so I was there when we discussed the ADUs at length back in 2000. We started in 2017, had a bunch of meetings and through 2018 and went into effect 2019. So we heard from lots of residents. You know, plenty of people did come and they wanted to build an ADU for their adult children or their aged parents or for themselves and then rent out the big house to somebody else. So that's great. But we did have plenty of people that came and would like to, you know, build an artist studio or an office, or one guy wanted to build a cheese making area. We discussed it at length, of course, on the Planning Commission. You know, we really decided there was not a way to regulate what people use the space for, right? You can have rules that it has to have a kitchen and a bathroom and bedrooms, but you can't force people to use it certain ways. We did come to the feeling that if people build these, that, you know, the world changes, their life could change and they could come to a point where they did need to rent it out, or when the property gets sold, it would have a place that could be rented out. But I think as many speakers have said, the cost is so high that I'm afraid, you know, the people that have the money to build things are ones that have lots and lots of money. And, you know, if they just want a new office or an artist studio can build it, the finances don't make sense. So I'm discouraged about using the ADU mechanism to really think we're going to build more housing and have, especially low income, have it live here. So for me, focusing on some of the other lines in your chart will be more productive for actually generating housing, especially low income.
Does anybody want to add on to what Anne's talking about here? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I appreciate what Anne, you know, I appreciate hearing that perspective from the Planning Committee, and it sort of tracks what I've been thinking. I do think, you know, we're sort of faced with a very imperfect legal requirement, not particularly well drafted, in my opinion, and in some areas a bit ambiguous. There's this number we've been assigned, this RENA number, that I think a lot of people believe does not properly take into consideration some of the restrictions or limitations that the town has. The ADU piece is only one component of that. And it's certainly, one could say it's not a very effective measure of actual affordable housing. One could certainly say that based on the way that it was created, this formula was created. However, I part of me thinks that trying to somehow create a system, and I don't know that it's even possible, that in which we can force affordable housing into the ADU piece might be a fool's errand. And, we're better served focusing on the other components and taking, the units we can get, or taking the units that our ADU production is allowed to yield under the current, the current formula, and just acknowledging that the cost of creating these ADUs is so high that it's unlikely to yield a lot of actual affordable housing. I mean, the prefab piece, I think, is worth hearing more about, because that's a growing industry. And if it can, I don't know a lot about it except what I've read, but what I have read suggests that there can be ways of creating small structures, these tiny houses, etc., that are prefab and that are much more cost effective because they come pretty much already constructed, if you will, or they're assembled on site. But I do think that's one area that would be worth pursuing within the ADU context. I just don't know that we're ever going to be in a position where the ADUs are going to yield a lot of actual verifiable, what's the word? Enforceable, affordable housing units. But I certainly don't think we ought to throw out whatever whatever count we can get from those as part of our RENA. Again, I just want to be clear. I'm all for increasing affordable housing stock within our community. I just don't. I want to be smart about it, and it doesn't seem to me like the ADUs are going to be a very significant, or are going to be very likely, let's just say, to yield actual affordable housing units. So sorry for going on for so long.
No, it's great points. I hope people kind of continue this discussion. Yeah, Janie, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so in Bend, Oregon, just an example, a company called Hiatus Homes built a 22 unit tiny house community, and they hit the market at around 269. And I want to say this like 5 years ago. So you purchased in this community. They're now at 469, okay, for a tiny home. I mean, insanity. They're selling for $500,000. But this community, this developer, they have different models of multifamily, micro housing apartments, great, green building technology, all sorts of things. And I just truly, living in a multifamily community myself, I think scattering people around isn't necessarily the best answer, because you have private property rights. You can't tell people how to use their ADUs. You really have no control over that. But building multifamily homes in places where there are commercial developments, more parking, more, less congestion of traffic, as was mentioned before, to me, that is the solution. And, perhaps we have a nonprofit partner that manages the property, because that's another issue. You can build it, but if you don't maintain it, that's a big issue, right? So something to consider, because to me, the ADUs are really just kind of a novelty project for your personal friends and family. I don't think it solves our, task.
Okay. Thanks, Janie. Bob, let's go to you.
A lot of the comments express exactly what was in my head. Councilmember Hughes is someone who has expressed the view that the ADUs aren't being occupied. He refers to the low income category as fancy pool houses, is the term he uses. And I think it'd be very helpful to actually have data to know, how are these units being used. I would suggest that we consider having a subcommittee that would be tasked with doing a poll of recently permitted, say in the current housing cycle, and participation would be voluntary, of course, but I think a lot of people would probably feel called from a civic duty perspective to share how it's being used, and then we would have some data to understand, because are we really basically just fulfilling our affordable housing mandate without actually producing affordable housing in the form of ADUs? They're not cost-free from a community perspective, a community risk perspective. Structures add way more latent heat waiting to be liberated than vegetation does. They're the highest risk item on the landscape. Related to that, I would like to understand where the ADUs are built relative to what has been characterized in Portola Valley by fire safety professionals. Are we building in very high hazard areas, or is the current expression of the ordinance sufficient to prevent that? And maybe it's worth reconsidering the emphasis on ADUs versus the hazard that they represent to the community if they're not actually providing affordable housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. Helen, I think I jumped over you. Why don't you go? Are you there?
Yeah. So, I definitely, sorry, I said my comments earlier, but to echo, I don't think that ADUs really will meet the low and extremely low and the moderate income levels. Number one. Number two, prefabs. We have a flat site for personal experience, but we have lots of trees, and they can't crane it in over our beautiful trees. So that's a problem. A couple of other issues with the prefabs that we have within our code that I would love to see our code re-examined to make it easier to use prefabs is you have to match the primary residence. Most prefabs, are prefab. They don't match your primary residence. So in terms of the trees, personally, I wish that we had some sort of tree mitigation that if you needed to cut down a tree here or there, you could mitigate it somehow. Obviously, oaks are heartbreaking to cut down. So to be able to use it judiciously, that kind of idea. The other concern I have about ADUs currently is there are no bedroom counts, and everyone seems to think that this is a rental source. I guess it's just for single people or young people, or maybe, older people if they want to rent out their primary residence. But for families, again, I know many families who, single moms who have had to move out of the area, and it's like a scarlet letter for them. They're just, the ADUs that are available are not family friendly. And prefabs, going back to the prefab issue, 1,200 square feet. I found one company out of dozens, I can send you dozens of lists, that's a 3-bedroom available. So at 1,200 square feet, most of the prefabs are for 2-bedroom and not very family friendly. So in closing, again, I just don't think that ADUs meet the low income or lower income categories. And so I hope the town finds other ways to meet that category. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, Sue.
I've been thinking about affordable housing, about second units, and having considered that since the very first time we were faced with state interference with what they desired for us to have for affordable housing. I only think this is one of the things. As more and more, I think it has to be a combination of our affiliated housing, of the likes of Sequoias, what we can add, the Priory, all the things that we mentioned. I think it has to be a combination, and I am so impressed. I have been on the planning commission site at the planning commission meeting and the town meeting, listening to all the people and their thoughts about it. And there are a lot of positive thoughts out there. And whether we look at it, we jump up high and we look at things that we could possibly be doing ahead of the basics that we have to do here. But I don't think we can do it without looking at all these things. I really think we need to participate. I think it is my job to be talking to the Sequoias that this business of what we have here and our thoughts on workforce housing, as the Priory has done. There's room for this and there's need for this, and this brings in this kind of application to the people who are needy of this. And I just like to see us go wide before we go deep and narrow. My thoughts on those town meetings was very, very positive in listening to some of the creative thoughts of the residents. And I'd like to see us do more of that.
Thanks, Sue. And we're going to circle back to some of that input from the community in a little bit. Great. Okay, Al Sill.
Yeah. I guess I just like, I think that Sue made some very good points, and I think we really shouldn't give up on ADUs. I think that they're going to be an important piece. It's a tough problem to solve. So I don't think we should lose sight of they're a part of the solution, but realistically, they're probably not going to help us much on the low income, very low income side of it. But I don't think we should be giving up on ADUs. Particularly, I think that people are losing sight of the fact that this is a 30, 40, 50 year kind of problem. And the fact that somebody's building it and for the first couple of years are using it as a study or a pool room, something other than housing doesn't mean that it won't be used for housing for many years in the future. So just because it's not today being used for housing, I don't think we should treat it as it's a useless exercise. But realistically, I don't think we're going to get much in the way of low income housing, given the cost to build the ADUs out here. Okay, that's all I wanted to bring up.
Right, and with the housing element targets that we have, we still need to achieve moderate and market rate housing. So, so these ADUs, maybe we're shifting them more to that end.
Right.
That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna go to Jeff. You haven't jumped in yet. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the point about ADUs not being, the point about the disconnect between what they're designated as and what they actually get used as is well taken. The last time around, ADUs were the workhorse, partly because it's a way to spread the housing out throughout neighborhoods instead of concentrating it in certain areas. It was kind of relied on what I'll call market forces. That is, that people sort of came forward, chose to build an ADU on their property. I agree that it's probably, a lot of it's probably not going to sort of, most of them aren't being rented, and most of them aren't being rented, especially to sort of very low income or low income individuals or families. So no, it's far from perfect. You know, we've talked in the past about how you actually strengthen that connection. You know, deed restrictions are really, you know, it's, I mean, if you insist on a deed restriction, I don't think any of them would get built, or very few of them would get built. So practically speaking, I don't think it would probably just end the development of ADUs or greatly limit them. You know, I do think there's a value to them in that, I mean, first of all, they're not all being used as rentals. Some of them are being used for, you know, like people are, you know, families or older families are moving out of the area or moving into the ADU, so their younger children and their children can live in the houses. It's serving some practical needs. It is getting inventory out there, and like Al said, you know, the uses of these things change over time. If you have the units there, it you know, it allows people to rent them in the future as circumstances change or as owners change.
Jeff, I just want to ask, just to jump on where you
Sure.
are right now, is it the former housing element that identified goals for the town, or is it the general plan in terms of trying to find ways to keep older residents as they retire and get on fixed income, and younger generations from town, they'll keep them in town?
Yeah, the housing strategic plan
That's the
Yeah.
strategic.
is what you're
Yeah.
thinking of.
Yeah, so
Yes.
you're sort of backing up the strategic plan, and that if we have, you know,
Well,
older members or second generation members staying in town in these ADUs, it'd be accomplishing some of the goals of the strategic plan.
what I'm saying is it's messy. You know, we know that not, you know, like far from not every ADU that gets built is being rented to someone below market rate income. We know that. We also know that, you know, some of them are getting rented to people at probably fairly, you know, higher rents than what you might like, but it is fulfilling a need. Somebody who lives, you know, maybe works in Silicon Valley is getting a place to live. It's fulfilling a need. It may not be fulfilling the need that we think we designate it for. And that's, I mean, it's messy, and I'd love to, you know, I agree with Bob about that. You know, it'd be great to have more data on this. So I think we should have a program in this element where we do track data, and maybe try to talk to people who are renting ADUs and try to get some feel for what, you know, where and how, what ADUs actually can be used for. I think that would inform. It might not do a whole lot for this element, but would inform us in the future.
I think it'd be great to go out and collect data, actually. I don't know how you
Yeah.
accomplish that, if it's members of our committee calling existing ADU owners, but it'd be really helpful to understand how they are being used.
We've talked about sending out like a survey from staff that's just voluntary to,
Yeah.
we know who built the ADUs and where they are.
Yeah.
We could just get voluntary answers from them about what the actual use of the ADU is. I also agree with, I think it was Sue's point that this is one of several things that we are doing to increase, you know, just housing stock in response. I mean, you know, I think what Rena is trying to do is really increase inventory at all levels, and this is one of the things. You know, ADUs are one piece of that bigger solution. And you know, again, it's not perfect, and I agree that it's not doing exactly, you know, it's not working exactly the way that it's sort of formulated on paper, but it is also, I believe it is serving a need. So I don't know, you know, deed restrictions just don't seem practical to me. I just hard to imagine anything that would actually, you know, it's hard to imagine limiting people to the rents we're talking about, because I agree that the units are very expensive, and you pretty much have to, like, we've talked in the past about incentives where, you know, like maybe you subsidize a rent to someone. If someone's charging a below market rent, you sort of like you subsidize them in some way, like you pay them a little extra money for renting below market rate. That's another, you know, it's all a question of what do we do with things like our inclusionary housing fund. But it's an area where I think it's the sticks are going to be really hard to apply, and so maybe we think about carrots going forward.
Okay.
That's
Thank
my
you,
one
Jeff.
thought on that.
That's a good
Thanks.
input. Thank you.
So
Bill?
this is Eric, just real quick. I didn't know how to raise my hand because I'm on mobile, but I just wanted to chime in because two things. One, I've got an ADU that we redid, and we're renting it out for, you know, kind of 1/3 of what we think market is to a local person who works in the equestrian world. So it's about $1,100 a month. So that might just be a good data point for people to have. And it's a full 1-bedroom, 1-bath with a kitchen and office. It's about 900 square feet. But the second point is to chime on whoever that was just chatting. I could not agree with you more. I don't think you can try and deed restrict or limit somebody who pays for the conversion of a unit or the building of a unit on their property. unless you do give them some incentive. And if you do incentivize them, I do think people would be willing to do some deed restricting or some control restricting of how that unit is used. My question to the staff and to some of the other people on this committee, I know how many dollars are out there for kind of what I would consider to be institutional affordable housing and deeply affordable housing, because I'm engaged in building about 250 of those units right now. But when it comes to Portola Valley and what we could potentially either give to or help our residents identify and secure additional funding or funding that could potentially offset the cost, I'd like to know if there are some of those sources out there, and I just don't know any of those sources on an individual house basis or an individual property owner basis.
All right, thanks, Eric. All right, we're going to shift back to the committee discussion. All right, Bill Kelly, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump?
Yeah, just very briefly, and I'm afraid
Yeah,
I'm going to have to
wanna
jump
hear what you-
right after this.
Yes.
In listening to this, it feels to me like in the past we've had three potential objectives in this process. The first was complying with our RENA obligations and doing so irrespective of the real world consequences of it, but simply complying with the legal obligations. The second was increasing our housing stock generally, just from a supply standpoint. And the third is potentially creating opportunities for affordable housing. My sense of things is that in the past, item number one was the primary objective, and the real world consequences of actual housing getting built was so unimportant that we haven't even tracked, for example, whether people are living in ADUs. It's hard to imagine we haven't asked that question unless we didn't want to know the answer. So I think the progress that we can make here, by all means, let's keep the ADU category, and if we can get benefited from it, from meeting some very challenging requirements, great, let's do so. But let's not pretend that that is really a source of housing for us, much less affordable housing. I think the areas that we've identified in the prior meeting, that's where the supply is going to increase. Ideally, we can get some affordable housing out of that, although the standards that or the allocations that are being talked about seem kind of fanciful to me. But just adding to supply is itself an important regional goal. And at the end of the day, at least in terms of my own thoughts as participating in this process, if we're able to increase the supply, we will have done our regional duty. That's all I got.
That's great, Bill. I love your point about the objectives and, maybe revisiting what they were previously, but then really being clear going forward about what our objectives are for ADUs. And
can I quickly respond to that, Jocelyn? I mean, you brought up, Bill, you brought up three things. And the fact is as the council, we've thought about all three. I mean, we had to comply. We had to do the compliance part, the first part. This council spent 3 years developing a housing strategic plan because we knew that compliance was not the whole picture. We've thought a lot about what it actually means to build more housing and to build it and to include the affordable housing in it. I mean, we should have the information you're talking about, and I believe and I don't think it's that hard to do. But the fact is, I mean, several of my colleagues in the council for years have been advocating that we build do something in the field of affordable housing. So it is both checking a box, as you say, but it's also trying to go beyond that to what's actually meaningful. So
there's the old joke about the difference between trading sardines and eating sardines, and ADUs feel to me like trading sardines because nobody's eating them in terms of creating real housing. So I think there are other solutions to this. And I hope going forward, we can spend our efforts focusing on those, because I think those are likely to really increase our supply locally. Anyway, that's my sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and be clear at what level we're targeting too, right? In terms of income level, and be honest about it and sort of, yeah.
I mean, some of the sardines are being put in very fancy meals. So
yeah,
I agree.
Be honest about it. be honest about it to the extent the law pushes us in the right direction. I mean, historically, we adopted best practices because we were told that's what would work. And in fact, it worked. We got our clearance. Good for us, but we're probably going to be a little tougher.
Yeah, that's right. We've been meeting the requirements set. Okay, well, thanks, Bill. That's great. I want to go to a couple people that we haven't heard from yet. So Nicholas Targ, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I go back to Sue and Crane and look to her all of the above kind of strategy. And I think Jeff's comments really echoed and built on that as well. And the ADUs are meaningful. They do create opportunities. What those opportunities and how those opportunities are fulfilled probably changes over time, and more information, frankly, is better in achieving the goal that the state has set for us. It's important and an important opportunity to seize on. One question that we might have for Kara, or perhaps for the planning director, is whether the new housing laws create opportunities for ADUs in homeowners associations that historically may not have allowed for ADUs before. And it creates an opportunity to place attached, excuse me, ADUs in houses, which both addresses a housing need, doesn't produce, in a certain sense, new housing, but it creates new opportunities to be housed. And it also doesn't create new opportunities for fire. So the question that I would have is, in the context of homeowner associations with CC&Rs, what do the new housing laws tell us about an opportunity to build an ADU? Laura, I don't know if you can speak to that, or Kara, if that's a Kara question.
I'll respond. The new laws now prohibit covenants and CC&Rs and restrictions by homeowners associations limiting the production of ADUs. So it used to be the case where it was very common for HOAs and CC&Rs to include restrictions on the construction of ADUs. But now the state laws have preempted those provisions. So in areas in Portola Valley that previously have operated under that restriction, it is now legally possible for them to build an ADU on their property. Of course, we still have the issue of whether that ADU will be used for additional housing and the enforcement of that. You know, I think if you're advocating for an attached ADU, there will be a perception that maybe that would be an opportunity just to expand FAR for the parcel, but you know, there could be some potential under new state laws.
So I think that's interesting. So do we know if there have been restrictions on the construction of ADUs, attached or otherwise, in some of the HOAs? I don't feel it's particularly necessary to name names, but at least not at this point.
There have been. That my understanding is that there have been restrictions on ADUs by certain HOAs.
Do we have a sense as to how many parcels will be opened up through the new housing laws? That's to say, do we know how many units are presently, or dwellings, I guess we call them homes. How many homes are in the HOAs that have previously restricted the use of those homes for attached or separate dwelling units?
No, I don't think we have that information. That's an interesting question. No one has really asked before. Some of the HOAs have been considering their policies over the last couple of years. And so I'm not up to date on what current, restrictions were before these state laws went into place, or if those restrictions were still in place or had been modified somewhat. So we don't know.
If it would be acceptable, is that something that staff might look at? As if that's to say, if there's a new opportunity to create a type of unit that I think represents about 12 or 15% of the dwelling units within the town itself. At least that's what it was last time we went through this exercise. We might expect, probably not in year 1 or necessarily through year 8, but you might expect there to be a similar kind of distribution within the HOAs that are have new flexibility in that direction.
So I think this would be an item that maybe through the chair, we would bring to the meeting of the chair and the vice chair and the council subcommittee as we're balancing priorities. So it's something that staff could do, but it would be time intensive. So we would just want to balance that with other priorities that we have.
Of course, there are, 8 HOAs in town?
That sounds right, but I don't know the number off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's good thing to think about. Thank you, Nicholas. Okay, Lucy Neely, we haven't heard from you tonight. Why don't you go?
Thank you. Yeah, grateful to be here. I agree with so much of what the committee members have been saying. And I do think ADUs, they're just one category in a constellation of approach that can make this successful on the 3 levels that Bill Kelly was describing. It does seem like ADUs out of all the categories, like affiliated housing, ADUs, key inventory housing sites, might have like the least return on actually occupied units and the least return on low income or affordable units. But I still think they're valuable in terms of meeting RHNA, building housing stock, and even building affordable housing stock. But I just wanted to put out there, similar to public comment from Judy Murphy, that any of the categories, whether it's affiliated housing or key inventory sites, like getting affordable housing into any of those categories is going to be a challenge in Portola Valley relatively. So just as, this has been somewhat of a creative brainstorming session about like, how could this work for ADUs to actually create affordable housing? That's going to be a question for any category. It's just an inherent challenge to being in Portola Valley. So if Portola Valley, this committee, the community, whoever is actually serious about creating affordable housing, we're going to have to be creative and persistent and enthusiastic in this committee, and then for years to actually be able to generate affordable housing, I think, with the challenging site that is Portola Valley. And I think there is an authentic desire to increase equity, diversity, and inclusion in town, because that'd be good for our kids as well as us. And then I just had a question in terms of the income measurement, like for these income categories, where is that income? Like, what's it based on? Is it Portola Valley? Is it Bay Area? Is it what?
The numbers are by county. So they're San Mateo County numbers.
Thank you.
And Lucy, just to echo, like those are values that this entire committee, discussed
Yeah.
at our very first meeting about what's important to us.
Yeah, and I've been paying attention to all the meetings, and I hear that authentically. I guess I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
it's
no,
going to
I'm-
be challenging.
I'm
to require
concurring with
that.
what you're saying. That's all. Yeah. Point well made. Thank you. Okay, Nicholas, Lucy, please get your hands down. Janie, do you want your hand up or down? Okay,
So
go.
I just
I'm
wanted
very
to
patient.
quickly mention, before I joined this committee or applied to it, I met with the head of school at Priory, and we've satisfied the affiliate housing for a long time, and now we have a new building, and we had potentially 2 ADUs on the docket under our last headmaster, but they've scrapped those plans because of the cost. So the Priory at this time is not planning any housing in the immediate future. So they should not really be brought up in terms of future affiliated housing at this time.
Good. Thanks for clarifying that. So I want to wrap this up soon. I want Sarah, we want to hear from you, then Sue, and then I think we're going to move on to the next item. So Sarah, go ahead. Curious to hear your input.
Sorry, I just want to say I concur, with where this conversation is going, that it's an important, ADUs are obviously an important tool in the tool chest for us to get this number. It's not going to be the end all be all, and it's certainly not going to address the low income or low income. And that it's important, really important that we figure out a tracking program going forward. I guess one thing I've been thinking about, and this is more of a question, is related to the survey. As I have shared in many meetings, I'm one of those ADUs that's on the list that is, was never intending to rent, and I'm not renting. And so I've been sensitive to kind of the situation from the get-go. And I'm wondering, I think it's super important that going forward, we look at this and figure out a program for tracking that's appropriate. But I'm wondering about a survey and what really, how does a survey and those findings impact our current RENA status with, basically we know we complied, we followed the state law, imperfect as we all recognize it is, and we want to do better going forward. Would a survey put our compliance with our last RENA cycle at risk? I just wanted to put that out there. I know it's a sensitive subject, probably.
So if you like, I can try to respond to that.
Again, please.
So we don't know if it would actually impact our current RENA requirements. Historically, HCD has not gone back and retroactively adjusted numbers or required additional obligations based on updated information. That has not been the historic practice. However, it's a new world, and we are certainly aware that there could be some changes in that approach. I think that what generally the ADU law is the methodology and the formula that 21 Elements created is an assumption that applies to just San Mateo County. And it is as described, it's a way of allocating ADUs to the various affordability levels. And it's been adopted, and I don't see HCD changing that for the 5th element cycle. It's similar to when we get into some of the multifamily development assumptions. There are certain assumptions if you zone and build at a certain level of density, there is an assumption that the people or the residents living in those apartment units will be of a certain income level. And you don't need to do surveys and verify or even put a deed restriction on to take advantage or receive credit for projects in that affordability category if it's zoned to a certain density. So these are, I think, equivalent concepts. And I don't think that doing a survey is going to impact our fifth element cycle. It's certainly, if we wanted to argue that ADUs fulfilled a very significant affordable requirements in the sixth element cycle, HCD would probably look at our track record in the previous cycle. So that would be the major downside in doing that.
Thank you.
Great, that's Kara. But the other good point is we'd be dealing with reality, right? It should be helpful as we do this. All right, Sue Crane, you are getting the last word here, and then we're going to move on.
All right. Let's see. We really have done a wonderful in-depth discussion of ADUs tonight. Now, I have a unique experience that none of you have. I live at the Sequoias, and I am aware of this residential housing, the workforce of the Priory, and what's going on here to try to think about housing for our workforce and how we could possibly be able to do that. We haven't done our homework yet. And I guess I first want to ask Laura, do you think we will have some discussions exploring both workforce housing and affiliated housing? Because I think that is going to really be able to expose us to more thinking about this. I know that the Sequoias needs to participate in this, and however we're going to get them to do it in our situation now with our executive director just having resigned. But I think it's important. I think the Priory has done a very good job, and I expect they have added numbers to this affordable housing for their workforce. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think we do need to have specific conversations about affiliated housing, and we need to reach out to those partners and people who may want to join that program to see what their level of interest is. So yes, we definitely plan on doing that.
Okay.
And so that people know, the term workforce housing is just another word for affordable housing. So sometimes people refer to workforce housing as a particular target of affordable housing. Sometimes that's low income, sometimes that's moderate income, depends on the demographics, the workers, the income level. But usually workforce housing is terminology that's used to target employees that serve the needs of a certain community, so that everyone can kind of start to get familiar with that terminology.
Yes. I think this is a good thing for us to explore at this time or at another time.
I agree, Sue. I think I agree completely. I just to wrap up with a final question. So I'm looking at this handy dandy housing element update timeline that we have in our packet on page 19. And I'm just curious, Laura, like, when do you envision that we would come back to this discussion regarding ADUs? And, you know, talk about things like philosophically, what are we striving for here? What are our objectives? And kind of, you know, get more I guess, definite in what we're talking about in this topic. Where would that fit in this whole process where we come back to this?
Well, we're trying to explore the different mechanisms that will produce units. So we've been starting to talk about the sites inventory. We're talking about ADUs. We'll talk about affiliated housing. We'll talk about sites inventory more. We'll take that Excel spreadsheet that Adrian showed and start tweaking it and filling numbers in and looking at it probably regularly now as we go through this. So we were trying to give you basic information on multiple topics, and then we'll kind of have to bring that together and see how the number of units are balancing. And then we'll get more feedback from you then when we have more of those pieces to bring together.
So does that happen in the winter, spring, summer? I'm just kind of looking at the timeline.
Winter into spring.
Winter into spring. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I think it'd be helpful to me, like every time we go into sort of an area in this project as we're going along, is to keep referring back to the timeline and kind of putting the pieces together so we understand how this stuff layers and how we're going to get to conclusion. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. I enjoyed that discussion a lot, and I appreciated. We've gone way over on the time, but hopefully you guys agree it was worthwhile. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is feedback from community meeting and town council planning commission study session. I don't know if we can pick up some time in this section. There was 30 minutes allocated, but I'll leave it up to the team here.
Thank you very much for that. So yeah, the intent of this presentation is twofold. We'd like to give the committee an opportunity to discuss the townwide community meeting that occurred on October 14th and the joint town council planning commission session that occurred on October 27th. So since then, a range of meeting materials have been posted on the town site, including Zoom recordings for both of those meetings, meeting presentations, and in the case of the community meeting, a full meeting summary, which we had been referring to at our past meetings. So it's up and posted now. And that includes discussion content from the breakout rooms. There was a lot of questions asked about that. So that's all those comments are hopefully captured there and are up for everybody to review. So first, this is sort of just a quick update on how that community meeting went in terms of the structure. Just to remind everybody, a lot of committee members were there and did attend and did observe, but just really quickly, that meeting, as I mentioned, was on the 14th. We had approximately 70 participants. It did flux a little bit throughout as people sort of joined and dropped off, but around 70 is the number. We structured it as an intro to the housing element, and we asked in the small breakout rooms participants to give feedback on 4 main questions, and I'll share those with the group shortly. There were 6 breakout rooms of 10 to 12 participants, and then there was 30 minutes of discussion. So a lot of wide-ranging opinions did come out of those breakout room sessions, including there was a lot of people expressing a desire for housing for people that work in the town, teachers, firefighters, town employees, Sequoia staff. I've mentioned several times housing for the elderly, those with special needs, importance of diversity of housing choices and affordability. We also heard a lot about fire safety, which was not surprising, of course. People raising issues about evacuation and what that means if we increase the population of the town. There were some objections to the state's involvement, dictating the RENA requirement. There are people concerned with that. The topic of ADUs came up a lot, which is why we wanted to sort of tie that together this evening as well on our RENA. And there were, I think, a lot of people that had encountered the ADU application process, construction process, and we're looking for ways to streamline that process. Concerns about existing town infrastructure, which we've heard from some of our public participants as well. The issue of public transportation and how that can satisfy especially the lower income residents that we're hoping to have move into town. And to wrap up there, concerns about maintaining the town's rural character and open spaces, people wanting to ensure that any new housing built blends in, doesn't stick out, sort of works with the look and feel of the town. There was some support for multifamily housing along main corridors, which is great to hear. We did look at those housing site scenarios in our last meeting. And multiple times we'd heard from participants that affordable housing units located along main roads, such as Alpine and Portola, that are proximate to shops and services would be the ideal situation. So we'll circle back to this, but I do want to flag it now. We did, as I said, have several committee members that attended that meeting. And so we'd love to hear from whomever is willing to share impressions of the meeting format and impressions of the feedback we did get from the community, and if any committee members who attended have suggestions for future meetings, because we do have 2 townwide meetings that will be upcoming in the winter and spring. They're not scheduled yet, but we'll be working towards those meetings, so any feedback would be great on that front. And then, of course, the other element of this agenda item is the Town Council and Planning Commission joint meeting. So what we did ask of them was to consider the same questions that were posed to the community meeting breakout room participants. So we just thought that was a good way to kick off that discussion with Town Council and Planning Commission. So that sort of got that discussion going, which was helpful. The discussion amongst Town Council and Planning Commission did yield a range of feedback. So that was good to hear. We do hope that committee members had a chance to watch the video that was built into the staff memo that was in this meeting's packet. There's links to that meeting as well as a timestamp. So if you just want to jump to that discussion of that part of the discussion of the joint meeting, you can do that. So that's kind of what we'd like to hear feedback on that. Because we did have several members of this committee that attended in their capacity as representatives to this committee. So we'd love to hear back on that, which brings me to our final slide here. So anybody that did attend, if you'd like to share your impressions with the committee, it would be good feedback for discussion this evening. So this is my last slide for this particular agenda item. So let us know if you have any questions about this. So if we want to start sort of how to kick off, we can talk through discussion of the community meeting and feedback from that. And then we can move on to this question of members that attended the joint session and their impressions from that. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Amy, go ahead, your hand's up.
Yes, I attended the meeting, and I was in a breakout session with some lively conversation and a couple of folks who have also, I think, been contributing their comments to these meetings. So some of the same folks, I think, and I thought that the conversation was very, within the breakout group, was actually very productive and respectful, and folks expressed their views. I was a little disappointed to hear, I think, some feedback here and there that some folks didn't think that the readout of the session was accurate. It was at a very high level. I thought it was accurate. I thought that the information being shared with the larger group was accurate, although again, it was a summary and it was at a high level. So it's not, it did not include all the details of the conversation, but I did think that and Jeremy was our facilitator, but I thought he did a nice job, both facilitating the conversation within the small group, but then also reporting out to the larger group. So, you know, that was my take on the group I was in.
Great, thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. So anybody else participating at the community meeting that wants to, yeah, go ahead. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I was also there. My group was pretty quiet, so I felt like I was a bit noisy, and I had to keep talking, unlike I do in these, to kind of keep it moving. But everyone was respectful, and we had some great discussion. I agree with Amy that I feel that the feedback to the general group was also accurately portrayed. So I was surprised to hear that some people felt that that it wasn't. At least in my group, it was definitely well portrayed. And a suggestion I think I made was that for those who don't feel comfortable speaking in this forum, if they were able to use the chat box to put their questions in or their comments, and that might make people feel a little bit more comfortable about expressing their opinions or having their say. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. Sue, were you there at the meetings?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was
What are
And
your impressions?
I thought it was very innovative, the way the town handled it. I mean, the questions were very whimsical in some ways. What do you like about Portola Valley? What do you think it would be? What would you like it to see? Well, how would you like to see it in 30 years from now? I mean, I think it gave the imagination a very good workout, and without making you know exactly what you want and what you don't want. I happen to be in Jeremy's group. I feel there are opinionated people, and they're entitled to their opinions, and they might be different than mine, and they might not. But I think it's a good exposure, and I would recommend we do it again. It's the only way that we can broaden our outlook to be able to focus in on this housing element committee. I appreciated it.
Great. Okay, that's great. I'm really glad members of the committee could participate in that and that bring feedback back. And as you know, we have future discussions. Hopefully you continue to fold in community feedback that you got from that and other experiences. We are shifting into kind of a committee outreach to the community now, as a matter of fact. But I guess before we do that, we're going to take a couple questions from the public. Okay, we've got somebody, phone number ending 7562. Sorry, we don't have your name there. Do you have a question, comment? Go ahead. Dylan, you think that one's ready to go, or it looks like there's a line through the phone on my screen?
Should be now.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. Caller number one.
I apologize, but I've raised my hands, and I guess sometimes I cannot, they don't see me, and then I cannot speak. So I had to use my phone.
Yeah, it's a challenge with the technology sometimes on this. Yeah, go ahead. Is this Caroline?
No, yes, this is Caroline Vertonghen. I really appreciate all the comments of the members, the committee members, and especially the residents as well. I have participated in both meetings, and so I think if we really want to go forward, then I think we should stop going the round and round. I hope you have heard this before. We've done several ADU strategic plans, and the one thing that is missing is data. And really, like members have said, if the intent of the RHNA numbers is really to show that we produce housing, more affordable housing, or a variety of housing, then it is important that all ADUs, even from cycle 5, should be included. We reached our RHNA numbers in 2018, and so we have 4 years where many people built more housing, especially because the rules were so lax. This has had an impact on our infrastructure and our resources. And I'm talking about the roads, parking, public safety, fire safety, water quality, water pressure. I can name a whole set of issues that we have presented to the town. And so the question is, do we really want to address these issues, or are we continue to talk about it and not do anything? It's very important for our community to feel safe and to welcome new people, but infrastructure and public safety should have been a priority in the first place. I have had a question in the beginning, didn't have a chance to ask, but included in your package is a map. It's called, it tries to explain why Portola Valley suddenly is called, well, is perfect for SB9 because we're called an urban district. We're not an urban district. And they quote that we have an urban parcel in there. Are they referring to Ladera? And is that the reason why suddenly from a rural community, we have become an urban community? That's a question that I would like to have answered by someone. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Laura, can you talk to that question quickly, or do you know what she's referring to?
I think I know she does, what she's referring to. I'm sorry. When we refer to the community as rural, that's a descriptive terminology that we use. And a number of these different bills that have either been proposed or adopted include definitions of what is urban and what is rural. And we do meet those definitions of what is urban in terms of what the laws are saying. So it may be contradictory to people's descriptive experience, but that is our interpretation of the laws.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, next caller is Rita Gomez and then Christy Corley.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking my comment. I also attended that community event, and I was in the same breakout room with Amy and Sue Crane, and Jeremy reported out for our group. And I have been asking for the transcript from the different groups because we had a pretty lively group. And I was told we're not going to get that. And I communicated separately with Jeremy about his reporting out. And his answer was that he only had 2 minutes to give the report. And so he had to make it, he didn't use the word succinct, but he had to make it very short. So it would be really great for the community because there were lots of good ideas that were expressed. And perhaps in another breakout session, there weren't a whole lot of ideas expressed, but I know ours was pretty lively. Sue Crane had a couple of really good zingers in there. And if that transcript can be written out, because that is the voice, there were 70 people there. That's the voice of our residents. The people that were then reporting out, Jeremy works for our town. The people that were reporting out are not the residents in this town, but those other voices in the breakout rooms are the voices of the residents of this town. And I think all of the other residents that were watching game number 5 or game number 6 of the Giants that missed out on it should have an opportunity to hear those words of those 70 people, residents that pay taxes in this town. So please, I'm a little personally offended on it being minimalized, but those are the voices of each individual taxpayer in this town. And those voices do count for something. Thank you. I'd like to see them post it.
Thank you, Rita. Yep, that's why we're doing those events, is because we believe those voices are very important. Christy Corley, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I did attend and I had difficulty getting on because it turned out that Zoom was better than Eventbrite or whichever invitation we signed up for in the beginning, and then we all had to switch to Zoom. So that would be one change that we have to get figured out, or we're going to lose people the first 5 minutes. It took me 5 and I had to redo it and get on Zoom. And I think that happened in every group. So we got to get that smoother. And the readout of 1.5 minutes, give us 5 minutes, give the director or the leader person more time to read out all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, by now I should know. This number is Myra.
Yes, thank you. I do have another comment. I was also in Jeremy's group, and I have to strongly agree with the woman 2 people ahead of me who said every comment needs to be heard. I do not feel that Jeremy properly summarized the opinions that were voiced in our group, because it was, as someone else said, a very lively group with lots of ideas. And this is very offensive. I am a property owner, as were all the other members of the group. And we feel our voices are important. These issues are completely central, not only to our town, but to our ability to get fire insurance, our ability to get out in terms of an evacuation, our ability to live comfortably and safely in our town, where many of us have lived for many, many years. We all want to see this new housing push work, but it cannot work properly if the opinions of residents are not roundly heard. And I'm so glad somebody else mentioned it. I'm only here to second that because I guess I wasn't feeling that I could bring it up. But now that it's been brought up, I definitely feel it's important that we do a better job of listening to the residents of the town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I want to assure everybody that the feedback from people in these meetings and other forums is very important to all of us, and we take it seriously.
Through the chair, I just want to make sure that people know that there's a 7 or 8 page summary, a very detailed summary that goes way beyond the report out that happened at the meeting. So that's been posted on the website for a while. It's included in this committee's packet tonight. And that is the really detailed description of all of the comments that we got. And so we're hoping that people are aware that that's available.
Thanks. Adrian, can you give the URL where people can go to get the information on the website, please? I need a minute to wait.
Where can I share that? Do you mean like share my screen?
Or even just say it out loud. I mean,
just maybe the path of how they get there, Adrian.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Let me just quickly make sure I know it. I think I do, but I don't want to start talking until
you go to the
sure.
town website.
Yeah, I believe it's under the housing element update button. Just see here.
And this is for the 8-page summary, right, that we're talking about. It's also
Yeah.
in the packet for this meeting.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a link in the packet as well. Because what we did was we got all of the actual notes from all of the breakout rooms and made sure to include them in detail. Okay, just quickly here.
Sorry to put you on the spot right here.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
In the meantime, while you're looking with that, I'll just say too that, you know, these meetings are for the public, not just those breakout rooms. So everybody, you know, I hope all the, you know, the person who just spoke, I'm glad you're here tonight, and I hope you find, you know, participating in these meetings a good vehicle for you to share those concerns on a regular basis.
Just through the chair, this is Dylan.
Hi, Dylan.
I have the website up on my screen.
Yeah.
I can screen share if people just want to look at it that are in the audience.
Okay.
That way that takes a little bit of pressure off of Adrian.
Thank
So,
you.
no
Adrian,
problem.
thanks you.
Okay.
No problem.
All right.
Adrian, quickly, you sent the committee those slides with the feedback summarized. Did you need to? I wasn't able to open it, I guess. I wasn't sure if anybody else had that trouble.
Oh, they were in PDFs. Did anybody
Yeah.
else have trouble opening up the presentations for tonight?
I didn't.
The second one, you didn't? Okay, it must be my iPad. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So Dylan, here we go.
Sure. So for people who aren't familiar with our website, so this is the home page. So if you go to departments, planning and building, and then you'll see on the left-hand ribbon, you'll see housing element update for 2023, 2031, and then it'll drop down, and then there's accordion of information. And so Adrian or Laura, which one?
Community, sorry, Dylan, to drop community meetings.
There you go.
Yeah, and there's all the data.
Terrific. I think the website's looking really nice. And I think that's a great way that you've organized the information. So that's great, Dylan.
Yeah,
Thank you and Adrian for sharing this. This is helpful.
Thank you.
Make sure people know where to go. Okay, so you know, along the lines of involving the community and getting more feedback and just understanding of what we're working on the Housing Element Committee. The next item on the agenda is just about that. And I wanted to certainly invite the people who are involved in this discussion that I was involved in to participate too, but I was just going to share out. So I had a meeting the other day with some members of, we had the 2 town council members, Jeff and Sarah, involved, and then Al still participated, and then we had members of the town staff, including Jeremy, Adrian, Laura, Carrie Chin, who works on communications for the town. And the point of the meeting was to talk about how we can improve communications about the work we're doing on the Housing Element Committee, and how do we share it out better with the people in town so that there's greater awareness and understanding. And we came up with a bunch of ideas. I want to share what those are. And I wanted to also mention Janie Ward really was the one that kind of launched this discussion in the first place. I was in a information discussion with Janie, with Laura and Adrian, I guess, when we were kind of doing debriefs. And Janie mentioned that she thinks it's important for us to kind of amp up the communications. And so I've asked Janie to take the lead for our committee in working with the town team on doing communications. And one of the things that, so thank you, Janie. She agreed, fortunately, which is, I think, going to be a big help to everybody. And we really appreciate your time that you're going to put into this, your effort. So one of the things that Janie's going to help out on is after every meeting is put together a summary of what was talked about, and that's going to get included in a number of places. The town puts out weekly updates with information about various committees and what's going on, so it'll be included in that. It'll go on PV Forum, and it'll be posted on Twitter too for the town. And that's going to be along with meeting reminders of upcoming meetings, but these summaries are going to be posted in those places. So that's one thing. I think Carrie Chin on the town team is already working on banners for Ford Field and Town Center. And the call to action is to go to the Housing Element page on the town website that you just were shown by Dylan. Just let people know that that information is there. We're going to get, I guess, try to get just more prominence on the town homepage and the website in general, just make sure that those links are clear. And then there may be some more social media stuff that we can do with stories from the county that talk about how people are benefiting from affordable housing. Sorry, that's my mother calling from Boston. Turn her off. Sorry about that. Okay, and then the last thing is something that would involve all of you. And I wanted to find out if it's something that you're interested in doing. And I don't remember who in this group brought up the idea, but I think it's a very good one, which is to charge everybody on the committee to do some kind of outreach, either have a Zoom sort of event with your friends or people that you know in town to talk about the housing element and give an update, or set up a little coffee or something in your neighborhood and try and invite some people, just really doing an outreach to people that you know to help get the word out and get feedback from folks in town too. And I think Janie offered to work with all of us on getting some kind of key talking points together so that we've all got kind of a common message to go out with and key points to share, which would be very helpful. So I guess I wanted to get feedback from all of you. Is this something that you'd be interested in doing and you think is a good idea? Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Absolutely, yes. I
Great.
think it's a wonderful thing. And I just think from my perspective at the Sequoias, it would be so helpful. I mean, I talk about this, people are asking me questions, and it always happens at the dinner table because we have communal dinners every night and everyone knows about this and they ask me questions. I answer their questions. The next day they ask me their questions. And it's very important that I keep the Sequoias notified of all that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's going to come back again from the Sequoias to the town when the town can finally participate in this. So
Yeah, great. We're lucky to have you on the committee, Sue, and that you're over there. You're kind of a strategic person, because you're doing a lot of outreach already, it sounds like. You know, one thought as you were just talking, people could also reach out to somebody else on the committee and do it like to partner up, if that felt more kind of fun and supportive, you could do that. Anybody else want to volunteer like Sue? Bob, you're raising your hand. Are you going to hold a large event at your house?
What's that?
Are you going to hold a large event?
No, I'm actually not volunteering. I'm not raising my hand to volunteer. I'm raising my hand to make a point. And that is, you know, communicating to the community, I agree is a very important priority. One of the main tools for that is detailed minutes. We talked about that last meeting. Someone on the committee shared the view that detailed minutes are worthless. That doesn't fit with my experience at all. I've lost track of the number of times I've been able to find out what's happened at meetings by searching the PDF of the detailed meetings. And so I spoke to that at the last meeting from the perspective of a resident who wants to stay abreast of what's happening but can't attend the meetings. I can speak now from the perspective of a committee member who wanted to remind himself of an answer to a question at the last meeting but can't, because our minutes are not at the level of detail as, for example, the trail committee. So
yeah. I just want to just jump in.
Let me just finish my thought, if that's all right. I'll just finish my thought, and that is, if keeping the community informed and abreast of what we're doing is important, I really think we should reconsider our approach to minutes, because that's a very important tool that we're not using. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I just wanted to point out, I think the same links that you were just seeing with the other community information, we're posting the recordings from these meetings, and it's very accessible for people to listen.
I'm not going to go through the recording to answer the question that I wasn't able to remember. If it's not in the minutes, it's too big a barrier.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Janie, yes, our communications person, please.
Be kind, be kind. I will do my very best. I just had a question for what the trail committee, how they compile their minutes, if there's a trick maybe out there that I could be using to do something similar rather than transcribing to video. I think the question that when we spoke is using some of the services or whatnot, there's a question about accuracy. You know, and our meetings are fairly long, so, you know, I could rewatch the video and transcribe them, but if there's some, you know, software or something I could be using to help with that, I'm open to suggestions.
I can do a little bit of research for you, Janie, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, because I'm willing, I think there's definitely been a big call for this. But, you know, as a volunteer and things like that, realistically, you know, after sitting through a long meeting, then, you know, it'll take 3 times as long to type up the minutes. So,
absolutely.
I'd be open to that for sure.
Let me do a little digging and I'll get back to you. Thanks.
I've used Search eHub, but yeah, okay. Thanks.
We can, we can follow up on this idea after the meeting. Okay, anybody else want to share anything, or should we move on? So I guess what I want to propose is that Janie will work with the team on coming up with sort of a summary and talking points for everybody and have that ready for January in the new year. And we'll get it out to everybody and kind of at that point encourage you to do some outreach, and let's just see how that goes. Okay, thank you. Next item is staff and committee reports. So I'm going to turn it over to the staff.
Great, thank you. So there's a few things that are bulleted on the agenda that we wanted to bring to people's attention. So there's been questions about what are the topics and the schedule and how do those things come together. So we can't lay out all the topics into a specific schedule yet because things are evolving. We don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but we wanted to kind of keep track for the committee and for residents. What are the topics that are going to be upcoming for the committee, and then keeping track of the main schedule. So we just included that as a very simple document in the packet. And we're planning on just keeping that packet so that people know what materials we've covered and what's upcoming and can keep track of that schedule as we go. So that's the topics look ahead that we included in the first bullet. Then the second bullet, we had a really good visit with staff from HCD. So our consultants, urban planning partners, arranged this for us. We had 3 members of the HCD staff come to town. We sat and chatted for a while. We had great representation from this group.
Laura, can you just clarify HCD stands for?
Housing and Community Development.
Thank you.
So this is the staff agency for the state that will be reviewing our housing element and certifying our housing element. So at this visit, we had the person who will likely be the actual staff member that reviews our housing element come to town, meet with us, and tour part of the community. So we really prepared for this because it was a big opportunity to help them understand that we're trying to really meet these challenges head on, and that we have a lot of challenges that we're dealing with. So we had the chair and the vice chair, Jocelyn and Al were there. Jeff was there representing council perspective. From staff, we had Jeremy, myself, and Adrian. And so we sat with them outside. It was a sunny day, shared with them our geologic mapping, talked about fire safety, talked about other constraints and challenges that we have in the community. And then we took them around and showed them a couple of key sites. They were especially excited to see the 6 new housing units at the Priory and to talk about our affiliated housing program. So that was a really nice part of the tour. And we really found it to be, from a staff perspective, very worthwhile and important to start to develop a relationship with the HCD staff so that we'll have that rapport as we need to call them and talk with them and get determinations from them moving forward. So we wanted to make sure everyone on this committee was aware that that had taken place.
I just want to commend you all on the town team for making that effort to reach out to them and start building that relationship. I think it's going to be really helpful as we go forward with this.
Thank you. We really spent some time in preparing for it, and I think it was time well spent. I think it really came across what we were trying to achieve and develop some relationships. So that was great.
And I think by coming here, they appreciated the uniqueness of our town. And
I think they did. I mean, by the end, they were saying, oh, this is a hard job to try to plan for this housing in this scenario.
Yeah, they got it.
So they got it, I think, by the end. Kara's here, and she's prepared to give a brief update on SB 9. So we'll leave that to the chair, whether you'd like to receive that tonight. I know that that's a little bit late, but we included in the packet the staff report from the last time and the Zoom recording. If people are interested in that, we will be continuing that conversation at upcoming meetings. We also included an attachment for you. We wanted you to be aware of that there's a Department of Justice Housing Strike Force. That is a new thing. So that's just for your information and for you to be aware of. And then in terms of administrative updates, we had just a couple of things. You saw we're doing a bunch of website updates, both for the general housing element update, which you just saw when Dylan showed a screen, as well as the website for this committee. And Adrian sent an email on 11/13 to alert you to that. So we want to make sure members of the public are aware of that as well. And then also kind of administrative stuff, our normally scheduled December meeting would be on December 20th, which is going to start to be hard for people to be able to attend with the holidays. So we are proposing to move that meeting into the week before that meeting, with maybe a meeting on December 14th, 15th, or 16th. So we're going to send out a scheduling tool to everyone. If you could please keep your eyes open for that scheduling tool and please fill it out so that we can make sure that we can schedule a December meeting. We have so much to cover. We don't want to lose that opportunity to have a productive meeting in December. So please keep your eyes open for that email, probably from Adrian, but from someone on our team. And then some of you noticed and started to mention, we sent out an email right before the meeting, just with links to the PowerPoint. And this is to kind of serve that function in the old days when you'd walk in the room and someone would hand you the printout of the PowerPoint. So we're trying to achieve that just so that you have it and can refer back to it after the meeting. And we'll be posting more of that information on the website for the public after. So those are the administrative items. So it would be through the chair if you'd like to receive very brief presentation from Cara on SB9, or if anyone had any questions on SB9, we could just take those.
Yeah, thank you for all that. I just on one more administrative thing, I want to just clarify something that came up in the previous thing, and then I want to go to SB9 for a sec. So on Janie's role with communications, I just wanted to clarify that what we had talked about her doing is sort of a bulleted summary of our meetings that go into the things that I mentioned, the weekly updates from the town, Twitter, PV forum. And it's a format that's being used for town council meetings that Jeremy's shared with all of us that I think is going to work well. Janie's role is not to do minutes for the meeting. That falls on the town staff, and they're doing the minutes. And so I think, next time I get together with town council members and the team and planning for the agenda for the next meeting, I'll chat with them about the minutes again. Just so you know that we'll talk about that there. Okay. On SB9, Kara, I'm afraid it's really late and I apologize. I wonder if we could just really make sure people understand where to go to get the information, and then take questions from the committee and public that have come up. Is that okay? And perhaps we build in an SB9 kind of revisit at the next agenda.
Sure.
Is that okay?
That's fine with me, whatever the committee desires.
All right. So on page 22 of the packet is the summary of the SB9 discussion here. And then the audio, where do people go for that? From the town council meeting.
That link is also included for the Zoom meeting. And the Zoom meeting did include more information than what the written staff report included. So we would, for people that are interested, we would recommend that you listen to that meeting if you're trying to track those issues.
And does that fall under in the housing element section or in the town council or both?
It's in the town council minutes and agenda, and then just checking. I think in the memo I gave you, it included the link.
Okay.
So you should have the link in that memo.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Any burning things you want to communicate, Kara, while you have the floor, or before we get to questions?
So I will say that our current schedule our target is to get a draft ordinance to the council on December 8th. And that ordinance will implement SB9, both the lot split component of SB9, as well as the allowance for 2 units on a lot. And the direction that the council gave us in developing an ordinance was to focus on 2 things primarily. Number 1 is to focus on developing objective standards for approval of single-family homes. And the reason for that was that SB9 no longer allows us to impose subjective standards. And so with that absence, the council thought it was important for us to really take a look at our objective standards and beef them up to be able to substitute for our existing subjective standards. The second component of the ordinance that we are developing is that the application of the 2 units on a lot will be limited to the bare minimum of an 800 square foot dwelling unit. That 800 square foot is the same size that is described in the accessory dwelling unit legislation, if you recall. It also would have the same 4-foot setbacks that are required both under ADU law and under SB 9. And so there is a sort of a synergy between our existing ADU laws and the SB 9 proposal that the council has directed us to develop.
Super. Thank you for the summary. I appreciate it. Amy, did you have a question?
I did have a question. I had several questions, but I don't want to take up the time now. I'm going to listen to, I wasn't able to attend the November 10th meeting, but I'm going to listen to the audio if I can, okay, and see if my questions are answered. But
okay.
Yeah.
We'll have other opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would appreciate if we could circle back to as I assume we will, to SB 9 going forward.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. Okay, Bob.
2 questions. One, is my understanding correct that the town could require any development under SB 9 to be deed restricted to below market rate housing? That's one question. And then the other is, I believe this question was asked a month ago. Is it really 4 structures per parcel, or is it 6 if junior ADUs are included, or is it 8 if some other combination or permutation is used? Thanks.
So let me take your second question first. There are lots of interpretations and rumors flying around about the number of parcels. The legislation is very clear in that serial lot splits are prohibited. So you can only do 1 lot split. That means you ultimately will end up with just 2 lots. The legislation is also clear that if you do both a lot split and you develop 2 units as permitted under SB 9, that you cannot develop ADUs or JADUs. So the maximum number of dwelling units that could be placed on a parcel that is split under SB 9 is 4. Then as to your first question about the deed restrictions, there is nothing in the state legislation that authorizes deed restrictions. It would be wonderful if the legislature had done that. It's certainly, I think there's an argument that the intent of the legislation was to encourage affordable units, but the legislature did not go so far as to require that the newly constructed units be deed restricted. However, that is an approach that some cities are exploring. The approach is, I think, more feasible in more built out communities where the construction costs are much lower than Portola Valley's. In which case, if you're developing 4 units, it's much easier and more economically viable to deed restrict 1 of those 4 units. However, in Portola Valley, there are some challenges, but we are looking at that particular issue, as are many other cities.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the questions. Okay. I don't see any other little yellow hands up right now, so we'll go to the public. Rita Gomez, go ahead. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. For SB 9 with the League of Women Voters, I just want to remind you, and I put it in the PV forum, at noon tomorrow, they're having a talk, and I put the link for registering. And if you're interested in finding out more, Los Altos Hills is going to be doing their ordinance about SB 9 on the 18th, and you can read about it on their agenda on their website. but you know, the public is very interested. And so if there could be a call out on our front page, you know, how you go to a website and that's the interesting information that people really want to know, because it's all of these acronyms, it's all this stuff that's thrown at people. So when someone's trying to look, I mean, even in this meeting, you're searching on the website and this is the path and all of this other stuff. If we could have just, you know, what are the top 5 hot issues? And if we want to look for more, we can find more. But if there's a way for there to be a call out on the front page, because this is something big and it's going to change this town. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Appreciate it. I think, yeah, that's a good thing to keep looking at. Okay, I'm sorry, 851-787. Is that Myra?
Yes, it is. It's me again. Sorry, but I'm just learning. So here's where I'm really confused. First of all, I agree with what Rita just said, but it's very confusing for a neophyte to get into all the language and all the pages and all the detail and all the different kinds of memos. And now I learn also audios. It's hard to find, but having said that, there's one major confusion I have, which is there a minimum lot size for any of this stuff? Do you have to have a minimum lot size to apply for an ADU? Do you have to have a minimum lot size to divide your lot and make it into 2 parcels? Thank you.
Kara, do you want to address that?
Sure. The SB 9 does contain a minimum lot size of 2,400 square feet, and each unit, each resulting parcel needs to be at least 1,200 square feet.
Thank you. Okay, Christy Corley, you got a quick question? We all want to go have dinner, especially me.
Yes, but to me, SB 9 is the most important thing to be talking about.
No, I don't mean to minimize it. I was just being cheeky. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm hungry too. I gotcha. I'm with you. So I would like to know if the urgent ordinance is going to require a public hearing if a lot is going to split, and can you write that into the urgent ordinance? I think neighbors have a right to know what may happen. With lot splits, we could have developers buying lots, and many, many big things can happen after that.
Karen,
So
address that?
that's my number 1 question. And my number 2 question is off-street parking, and what will we be writing in our ordinance with the parking? We do know that setbacks are 4 feet side and 4 feet rear, which is also a scary thought. And I think if anything goes 4 feet, I would like to see our town, because we're considerate of each other. We want to let each other know if that's going to happen.
Hey, Christy, can we go to Kara and let her answer your questions? Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Kara.
Okay, so the law specifically prohibits public hearings for urban lot splits. The whole purpose of the law is to allow these types of projects to occur at a staff level, at a ministerial level. So there will be no public hearing. We are exploring notices to residents. We always have trouble with providing notices to residents of an event that they have no ability to influence. It's a tricky situation, but we will have some type of noticing probably connected with these applications. In respect to the off-street parking, the state law requires 1 parking space per unit. So if a applicant were to apply for the maximum of 4 units, there would be 4 required off-street parking spaces. On top of that, our ordinance is also going to look at the narrow streets that we have throughout Portola Valley, and maybe recommending some additional off-street parking requirements in those areas.
Thank you very much. All right, good questions, Christy. Thank you. Is this Eric Doyle now? got the hand up, 7562.
I think it's Caroline.
Oh, Caroline, sorry.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is Caroline. No, I'm not going to repeat everything what our resident said.
Thank you.
But what Christy said was very important, and we have brought this up on many occasions. Once again, I did not get a clarification on the map that you enclosed, that is enclosed in the package, showing that because we have a urban cluster, and it doesn't show where that cluster is, I assume it's Ladera, that for that reason, the whole Portola Valley is now an urban zoning. So perhaps Town Council Silver can respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll answer that. An urban cluster is any incorporated city or town that's over 2,500 people. Because we are an incorporated town and there are over 2,500 people, we qualify by that law as an urban cluster. That's what that means.
So it's just a definitional thing, right? Okay, great. So good questions. Anne, you want to have the last chance to...
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one important question, Akara. Yeah. The floor areas still apply even after it's split, right? If you had an acre lot, it was flat, you could build 5,000 square feet. You already had 5,000 square feet. You split it. You can't build another 5,000 square feet. You only get to build the 800 ADU. You kind of always get this bonus of 800 ADU. Is that right?
Well, it's a good question. It's subject to interpretation. That is our interpretation, is that that you can always be, that the state law requires that property owners be allowed to build at least 1,600 square feet. That's the 2 800 units allowed under for one lot. Mm-hmm. So, and any other FAR limits that would be more restrictive than 1,600 square feet would be preempted by state law.
Yeah, okay. Because, we all get so alarmed when we hear this splitting, put 2 units, it sounds terrible. But then you read that Turner report, and their assumption when they do the financial analysis is that almost none would be built, right? I'm saying none, but like 10% or something. When 2%. I read 2%, yeah. Sorry. When I read the background of it, it does seem like his assumption is that the massing and floor areas are going to still be intact. So therefore, what you can build, it's something, but it's not like, yeah, I'll take my Portola Valley lot and double the value of it. That's not going to happen.
Okay. Amy, go ahead.
Just one last, just to clarify, because there has been so much confusion about number of units. And Kara, I know you said this, but just to be totally clear, we're saying if someone takes advantage of both the lot split and the 2 unit option, or 2 unit right, if you will, the max they can have of units on each of those parcels that's created from the lot split is actually two units on each, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Thanks for clarifying. Nicholas.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out that for me, and with deference and respect to my fellow planning commissioner, I'm not at all convinced with the data that we have right now that the Turner report is applicable to Portola Valley. The property values here are simply different than they are in other locations. There may be issues with respect to infrastructure that make it more challenging, but the report is written for not here. And so when the planning director said that she was looking for ways to better analyze and understand the effect of SB9, I welcome that, but we shouldn't be confused about the applicability, the Turner report to where we are right here. Unless unless there's somebody else who's done the analysis, who understands it in the context of property values. I'd love to hear it, but I don't think that we understand what the story is. And yeah, Laura, I don't know if you have a sense, Jeff.
18 blocks.
Anybody?
I've certainly heard that opinion from other people as well, that just the nature of the property values, it doesn't apply. So we are thinking about if there's other sources of information or other ways to analyze it. But we don't have any conclusions on that yet.
Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Helen, last point, question?
Quick question. Sorry, let me close the door. Could I get clarification on the two 800 units? Because, for instance, if a lot has 3,000 square feet far and then they split it, are you saying that the new lot can only build up to 1,600 maximum? Did I misunderstand that?
The state law is similar to the ADU law, which says that cities and towns must, at a minimum, allow for the construction of 2 800 square feet units. So regardless of what the existing FAR is for the property, the state has said at a minimum, people have to be able to build at least 2 800 square foot units. And so you can take that and run with all different types of permutations on it. And one of the significant impacts of that particular provision is that what we are going to propose in our ordinance is that the new units that be developed under SB 9 will only be can only be 800 square feet in size. We are going to limit the amount of the SB 9 square footage allowed in Portola Valley pursuant to the state law. That was the recommendation of the council, and that's what we are implementing in our local ordinance. We'll see once, public hearing comes, the council may change their mind, but that's the way, that was the direction we were given, and that's the way our local ordinance will be drafted.
So if someone were to have a full acre, they would only be allowed 2 800 square foot units.
That's without, Kara, that's without ministerial review, right? Or that's with ministerial review. So if they want more than 800 square units, they have to go back through our planning process for the larger house, like a regular lot.
Because right now, for instance, we still don't have any reviews on garages. So someone could build a 3,000 square foot garage potentially, but you're not allowing housing. So that is of concern to me.
Ellen, I'm not sure what you mean. We review garages.
But there isn't a constraint of 800 feet. So we are prioritizing cars over housing for people with that idea, right?
No, as Jeff said, you can always build more than 800 square feet under the proposal. You would just have to go through the normal process that we have in existence right now. The streamlined process would only be available if you were applying for an 800 square foot unit.
So I don't, I'll just say, I don't think that's the spirit of the law that was passed by the state. So I'm sad to hear that, but thank you.
Okay. I think I don't see any more hands up. Appreciate everybody's participation in that discussion. It's a complicated topic. We keep learning. All right, last thing is the approval of minutes. I wanted to check with Bob Turcott and make sure the spelling of your last name has not changed.
No, my heritage is one of laziness. So we lost an E many generations ago. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes, I'd love to request to edit.
My contribution
Turcott's name, no E, please. Thank you.
no E, and I'll be dropping a T along the way here too. We don't need
Okay,
to-
just let us know. We'll update the minutes.
Through the chair, I apologize. I did the minutes.
It's all right.
I'm
No worries.
Canadian and we live close to Quebec and there's a ton of Turcots.
Yep.
Do they spell their name? All right.
No worries.
Yeah, it's a good French spelling, right? Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Sue. Second, all right, approved. Good meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody, for
Wait,
being here.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second.
Oh,
me.
Anne.
And then we need an official, all those in favor and all those opposed, because we need to
Okay.
reflect that in the record.
All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No, for the reasons I gave earlier.
You oppose approval of the minutes
Yep.
because of the spelling of your name?
No.
Oh,
No,
sorry. Okay.
joking, right?
I'm joking. All right, folks, enjoy your dinner. Thank you for participating.
you.
Okay,
Happy
good night, everybody.
And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, Sue.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.